a playlist original.
Well, a boy's best friend is his mother.
Kill her, Mommy. Kill her.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Live or die. Make your choice.
What are you waiting for, huh? What are you waiting for?
I'm not even gonna swat that fly. I hope they are watching. They'll see. They'll see and they'll know. And they'll say, "Why, she wouldn't even harm a fly."
They're here.
I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face. The blackest eyes. The devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your host Skis and Jackson, and another episode of Tales of Horror. Keeping it going. It is now October 2nd, so we're really into spooky season.
Absolutely.
Officially.
For those, I know there's probably a lot of people that don't start celebrating it until October, so congratulations and happy spooky season to those who are now officially participating. I know I spent October 1st reining it in with a spooky season watch, and I'm sure many others did too. But yeah, I'm happy to be here. October is one of my favorite months.
Yeah, and honestly, on Instagram and stuff, I've seen a few people that did start like us. They started watching or getting into it in September because it's a slow month. We had some slow theatrical releases, as well. After the Nun 2 opened decently, then we had a Haunting in Venice, which it was a good movie, but it didn't really open to huge numbers. And then Expendables 4 crashed and burned hard. So that kind of kept the September slow train going. We did get 3 releases over this past weekend with Paw Patrol 2 and Saw 10 and The Creator, and Paw Patrol 2 actually topped all of those, which cool. Good for kids that needed something to see at theaters. We always forget what the family audience wants stuff too, and I guess it has been a while since there was a true family kids movie in theaters. I bet.
When you mentioned that, I thought that was exactly where my mind went. I was like, what was the last kid friendly release like that? And it seems like it's been months. I'm sure there's been other stuff I'm not considering, but that's crazy that it topped The Creator and Saw 10, because I know both of those were getting pretty good reviews. They
were. The Creator, it's interesting because that tide has turned a little bit on social media because everyone's like, hey, support original movies, and then some people that saw it, they were like, well, it might be an original movie, but it feels as a sci-fi film like it's borrowing
derivative
from other sci-fi films. I didn't see it yet. I'm gonna try to see it this week. Again, it was that early word that sounded so positive, all the stuff I was reading, and then of course that kind of shifts once the regular folk get to see it and they're like,
exactly.
Is it what I thought it was gonna be?
That's a movie that I'm very excited for too, and I know that the middling reviews for it, I'm pretty confident that they are coming from people that are more complaining that it feels derivative of other sci-fi epics. But an $80 million completely original, not attached to any other IP movie is just so rare these days, and it's from a director who's been stagnant for the last few years. I don't think Gareth Edwards has done anything since Rogue One in 2015, 16.
Wait, when did Godzilla come out? Because he did that.
Oh, 16 too. Okay, I think he did them back to back.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a healthy
smokes. Yeah, definitely. So I'm I really want that movie to do well and get supported. Because again, just so rare, even a movie of that budget not being attached to any other IP, and it looks phenomenal. John David Washington, I've heard, is fantastic in it. So yeah, I really want to go see that as well. And Saw 10 has been blowing people away as well.
Yeah,
which you saw, right?
I did see. One thing I want to mention before I get into Saw 10, just because it was just on my mind when you said John David Washington. Someone mentioned over the weekend that this is his second movie as like a leading man that has been kind of like derailed by unforeseen circumstances. So like with Tenet, it was COVID.
Right.
That movie tried to like get people back in theaters, and it worked a little bit, but it didn't work fully because it was still it was like when we were in the heart of the pandemic when Tenet tried to open and theaters weren't at 100% capacity. I think they were doing half or less than half.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then now with the creator, I mean, thankfully the writer's strike is over, and it's so great on Twitter and seeing like all these different writers I follow who are part of the WGA who were like, they are excited to be back in the writer's room. Some of them have already sold like a few spec scripts since like the writer's strike ended. It's nice. Like they hit the ground running again as soon as the strike was over. You know, a lot of HBO and different, they're prioritizing like certain shows that they, didn't want to be on hold, but they had to, The Last of Us season 2. That's the one that they really want to fast track now that the writer's strike is over.
Okay.
The third season of Euphoria. That's another one they want to fast track as well. And no matter what the show is, it's just cool to see all these people getting back to work and working on these things. But that strike is over. But the SAG strike is still going on. And someone made a point that a movie like The Creator and another movie that didn't do well this weekend too, Dumb Money, might have benefited from its stars being able to be out to promote it. Some people were like, well, the director, Gareth Edwards went to Comic-Con and talked about The Creator. And I would have loved to see that, but I think a lot of people who go to events like that want to see the stars, and that's more of a grab for them than, a director or a writer, a producer.
I agreed.
And it's hard to tell now. I mean, I think some movies did just fine without having the actors there to promote them. Equalizer 3 still did well without having Denzel and Dakota Fanning out there pushing it. The Nun 2 did as well as it could, well enough. It's already cleared over $200 million worldwide, so it's fine.
Okay, yeah.
I think even like the Ninja Turtles movie that came out over the summer benefited without having to have like it had a big voice cast that could have been out there to push it, but I think it did well based on just brand recognition
and they did great promo for it too. I've seen it all over the place, YouTube and shorts everywhere.
And I think you mentioned on one episode, like when we were discussing the actor strike, and I think I said, like, do people really care about actors going on talk shows and doing all that stuff to talk about movies? And you were like, I think it really comes down to what the project is. It depends on what the movie is. If it needs more than like its IP to sell it, then it might benefit from one of its stars being out there to promote it.
Totally.
If it's just, and something like The Creator being an original idea with no real foundation to stand on, maybe could have benefited from John David Washington.
Certain that would be the case, yeah.
But then you have something like Saw 10, which we'll talk about later. I mean, I'll talk about the movie now, but like something like Saw 10, again, it's an IP that's familiar. It didn't really need probably Tobin Bell and that's Shawnee Smith, who plays Amanda, being out there to promote it, because horror on its own sells, and then it also has the name recognition behind it.
I feel like Saw 10 was a different sort of circumstance because they kind of, I don't know if I want to say that the movie cheated in its promo, but it was able to utilize Tobin Bell as like the they had that AMC spot where they had him as the the Jigsaw puppet, making fun of that Nicole Kidman AMC trailer. So that was big, got a lot of publicity online, which would have been great promo. And I've even just seen just little ads of Tobin Bell himself sitting in the theater, like telling people to come out and see Saw 10. Like, so they were able to promote it at least more than other stuff had recently. I don't know if there's any flack for that. I know that the AMC parody spot was taken down. But it did its job.
It hurt their fragile little feelings.
Yes.
You know what I thought was crazy though? When we saw it, and we saw it Thursday at an AMC, and they did not play for the first time since this thing started. They did not play that Nicole Kidman AMC spot ahead of Saw. When we saw it on Thursday, and I don't know if that's because they're like, hey, we don't want people to like make fun of this while they're watching Saw. But that ad has been in front of every AMC movie I've seen since they created it, and I know they're writing a sequel to that ad with Nicole Kidman as well.
Oh my gosh!
And I love the intention behind it. It's like let's have an ad where that showcases like the love of movies, particularly at AMC.
I'd say just make more of them instead of.
I also don't need it played in front of every time I go to a movie there.
That would get old. Certainly,
that could have been a TV commercial like that. You just air on TV, and it's fine. Right. I don't need to see that. Like it's coming to. Like there's like a brief pause where like, oh, maybe they won't play it, and then they do. And like the more it's gone on, like the collective groan in the crowd is like great. You're like, ugh, because like already AMC has like 15 plus minutes of previews on top of like their ads for like their Stubs program, and then all this other stuff that like plays before the actual movie starts. Okay, so
Cineplex here is the same way. It's pretty entertaining, mostly.
So like here, it's like it's the previews, and then it's all the AMC stuff, and then like fade to black. Right, all right, cool, the movie, and then they play that Nicole Kidman thing. Like
that would definitely be a straw to break the camel's back after a few times of seeing it. I'm like, okay, this is getting old. I think they should. I like again. I agree with you. I think the intention behind it is awesome, but like maybe some variety. Get a couple other actors to film their own and maybe cycle through them instead of showing the same Nicole Kidman one, because I know she got roasted at the was it the Globes or the Oscars where somebody made fun of her?
One of those. I think it was one of those. And they panned to her. Funny. She was like,
It was. What did they say that she lives inside AMC or something? I can't remember. It was a good. It was a good jab.
It was a good joke.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I agree. Either make another one quickly, because this has been out for I think almost 2 years.
Yeah,
close to it, if that.
Something like that. Yeah.
So yeah, make another one, or don't play it at all. I think we get the point. AMC, you make movies better. That's all. That's your whole tagline in that. Like we understand now. I also think it's funny too. There's a point in there, in that promo where she's like, when you go to the movies, you're taken to a place you've never been before. Yes. And when she says that, the first movie image they show is Jurassic World. And I was like, well, we've been there a lot.
Yeah.
so that's not true.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's also all in good. When people do make fun of it, it's all in good fun. And I thought that ad was so smart.
Oh, brilliant. I thought it was awesome. And a good workaround, a good loophole. Because you're not featuring an actor, but still,
exactly.
Yeah.
And as far as the movie, I mean, I was surprised. Like what came out before I even saw it was like the reviews were great.
Mm-hmm.
It has, I think, currently, at 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's the only certified fresh Saw movie of the franchise. I thought the first one was certified fresh.
I can't believe it's not. Yeah,
yeah.
I saw that recently too. I couldn't believe it. I mean,
you know what though? I kind of wonder if. Well, it'll be 20 years next year, right? For that movie. I wonder if it gets reviewed now and reevaluated 20 years later by maybe some of those same critics. Would the score be better? I mean, because people talk about that movie so positively. I mean, even if you don't love the rest of the franchise, most people are like, "Oh, that first one's really good."
Yeah.
I wonder if it would be viewed differently today, or if they would have a different opinion of it.
Well, it makes me curious. I haven't really read in depth any reviews of Saw at the time that it had come out. It had always been in favor. Growing up, like Saw was a very prevalent series in my youth, of just because it was so new and fresh and violent and terrifying, especially as a kid. I'm just not really sure what people's concerns with it were or their complaints when it had come out. So I don't really have any insight there. I'm sure though, hindsight's 2020. I think seeing now the legacy that is created and how it kind of refreshed and revolutionized at least that subgenre of horror. Hard to say that it's not a fantastic addition to that landscape. I think it's a wonderful movie, especially considering like it's micro budget. It's James Wan's first movie. Like, well, I think was he still in film school or had he just graduated? Like, it's really
just graduated, maybe. Feat. I mean, really cheap, micro budgeted movie that wasn't supposed to necessarily do as well as it did.
It's kind of like Halloween in a sense, like in that it's got a similar start. Yeah.
Yeah. And that few weeks, that October was so cool. I mean, because I think The Grudge came out a week or two before Saw, and very different movies, but like it was still like fun, kind of like good Halloween time that October.
Oh, what a great era.
And then like when The Grudge came out, it didn't feel like too derivative yet because we only had The Ring, which was like the first like American like remake of like Japanese like horror movies. The Grudge came second, and that was before they started doing all of them, where it was like, oh, let's remake The Eye, let's remake Dark Water, like that. Eventually, they started to like grab every Japanese horror film to remake it here, and thankfully, The Grudge was early enough. Also, a stroke of genius using the same director as Ju-on, so it was the same guy, but just adapting it for an American audience.
That's awesome. I didn't even realize that actually. I
so
really
that was
see
cool.
Ju-on. Yeah.
And then, but in the midst of that, we all knew we wanted to see The Grudge because it was like, oh, like Sarah Michelle Gellar's in it. It's like Buffy, and like it looks scary.
Yeah.
But then, like Saw didn't have that same kind of excitement before when I saw it. It looked cool, but it was like, all right, well, I guess we'll check this one out too. And I still, I when I look at that movie, I'm always like, hey, would I notice dude laying on the ground is gonna eventually like pop up and like and like you don't. I mean, there's no signal for that happening until it happens.
I can imagine that theater. Oh my god.
Went crazy. Went absolutely crazy. It was almost like it felt like you were in that room with them at that point.
I bet. Totally.
And then you have that whole like Hello Zep theme song that, I mean, one of the best, like I think movie score needle drops. Other than like the Halloween theme, I mean, I know there's other really good scores, but like there's certain horror movie scores when you hear it, you know exactly what this signals.
Yes.
and every Saw movie, it's usually like, there's the twist, it's coming. This is what, and they actually did that in Saw. They did that in Saw 10 too. But like the twists in this movie, it didn't have to be a great one. Like what they set up, and it was like, oh, that's kind of a cool like turnaround of like,
I'd heard the twist was kind of like one of the weaker points of the movie, but it still overall was like well received. But which is it says a lot about the movie itself for that to not really be the standout and it still be well received.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the best thing that they did for this one is that Tobin Bell he's center stage in this.
Nice.
It's his movie.
Sweet.
It doesn't start in typical Saw fashion. There's a lot of it's a more emotional movie than you would maybe expect, because you have someone who, of course, his methods and things that he's doing, it's morally wrong, right? But you also have this man who's dying,
right,
and gets this kind of like what he believes to be a new lease on life with this kind of like experimental, surgical procedure that could save his life. And the moment he finds out that he's been duped and it was all a scam and a con, like you feel that like emotional weight of like, thinking that you're going to live this full life and then having that snatched away from you. And then of course from there, it's like full on like total retribution for
back
for
to
everyone.
Saw basics.
Everyone. And it's cool how they bring Amanda into the story because like right. So like Saw 2, of course, the big twist is that she's in on it with him now and she's learning from him. In this movie, you kind of get her in the beginning stages of learning from him, and she's a little bit more, even though she is all in on his ideology, there's still certain things that she's a little bit unsure of, because there's like another character in the movie who was a part of the pan who is like a junkie, and she identifies with that girl, like, sometimes she told him like these things are outside of your control, like drugs are a very powerful thing, like maybe we can go easy on her. And he basically is like, no, like if she's able to pass her test and her will to live is strong enough, then that will be, her reward. Right. But she's in a position where she's not fully there yet. And it was kind of cool to kind of watch the early stages of that mentor-mentee relationship between them. And also their stuff's really emotional too. Like she doesn't want him to die. Like it's so interesting that they formed this very much like father-daughter relationship very early on, I guess.
Okay.
And it was really well written and really interesting to kind of watch play out. And then but you guys don't really care about like the story and emotional veracity of the story. It is very gory. And,
I would expect nothing less.
Some very fun traps. I realized while watching it that I haven't seen a gory movie like that in a really long time in the theater, and I was like looking away at certain points. I was like, oh, that's a lot. That's signature Saw though. So
yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's a lot of bloodletting. And
there also hasn't been a decent Saw movie in a few releases too, depending on who you ask.
Right. And you know what I also realized is as I was watching it, we were talking about different traps from the other movies, and we couldn't remember like which ones they were in. I think after 2, maybe 3, those sequels started to like blend together for me, and I don't even remember.
They were released
much.
year after year after year, right? Like very soon
Yeah.
after each other.
So you're like, was that in the 4th one? Like, are you? That was the 5th one,
Right?
Or was that in Jigsaw, or was that? I mean, I think I would know Spiral because like it was so different than the other ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like they all kind of eventually became one thing, and I was like, I don't really remember which one this was in anymore. But I guess the good thing though is that this new one was a complete return in the form, kind of took things back to basics a bit, and fans seem to really responded to it. I think it seemed like they really enjoyed it as well, and it's made enough money even in its opening weekend to justify the existence of. I don't know how they continue it on if they want to.
Right.
It's so interesting that this franchise shot themselves in the foot when they killed him in the 3rd one. And I know they figured out ways to like utilize Tobin Bell in each one after that.
Right.
But you got rid of your like main villain star after the 3rd movie. And even like people who wrote it were like, yeah, we kind of maybe should have kept John Kramer a while longer. But it's like, I don't know what you do if you just let this like, hey, this is a good kind of return to the franchise. He made a good one after a few lousy ones. We should probably leave it at that.
Right.
It's a good end. It's a good end to that story. Hey, it was good to kind of see that in between like 1 and 2 kind of thing, like what was going on in that period. And now I have a full picture of like what that timeline is between 1, 2, in this or whatever. And let's leave it at that, maybe. But it's Hollywood, so they probably won't.
It's Hollywood, exactly. I'm not holding my breath. I mean, I think 10 movies is a lot for a franchise, especially 10 in only 19 years. That's a lot. It's a busy schedule. So it'd be nice to let Sleeping Dogs lie. But I mean, I think it's great that they, at least if they did bring it back, they made a pretty solid entry. I see it's consistently up there in people's rankings as one of at least the top 2. Sometimes in the top 3 for people. So, fantastic. But wouldn't be surprised if we get a Saw 11 or 12 package deal. But time will tell, I guess.
Yeah, we'll see. But I would think, I know you got like, you haven't been in the movies a while and you're trying to prioritize what you're going to see next. If you had the time to see it, I think you would like it.
Yeah, I would like to. I'm not that well versed in the Saw franchise, actually. I've seen the first several times. I've seen a Spiral, and I saw a couple of those in the middle. I don't even think I've seen Saw. No, I think I've seen Saw 2 once. It was years ago. I don't even really remember much about it. But if it's just taking place after the first, I wouldn't really feel like I have to do much homework to go see it. So I might. I know I definitely am planning on seeing The Exorcist Believer just to get in this, even though I'm not that thrilled about it. Just by nature of it being spooky season. I haven't been to, I know I was talking to you about this off camera. I haven't been to the theater since Talk to Me in August. So I'm kind of getting that itch. Although my movie watching schedule is
at home
pretty packed.
Pretty
At home it's been the busier this last month and a half than it had been probably all year, which I think is a great thing. I'm very happy. But if I get the time, I like to go see it. I also want to see The Creator because that's theatrical, right? So for some reason I was thinking it was a Netflix movie, but that's I'm confusing it with Zack Snyder's new movie, Rebel Moon. It's going to be a Netflix movie.
Theatrical, $80 million budget. So it shows that you can make something that looks great and not spend $200 million on it.
Yeah. Chris Stuckman's video of it, he said he was surprised this wasn't a $150 million movie, which is a fantastic compliment. Yeah. But aside from Saw 10, had you seen anything since we last been together?
So thank you, Sony, for my copy of I Still Know You Did Last Summer on 4K.
Oh, nice.
I watched it. I haven't watched that in so long because the first movie is a fun like mystery thriller, like more of like a throwback to like 80s like slasher movies. And of course, like at the time in the 90s, it was second. It came out. That was the first one to come out after Scream. So that was like all right, this thing is coming back. This like genre is coming back. Right. So at the time when you saw the first one, it was very exciting to see it. And it was like #1 in America for like 3 weeks in a row. It was a huge movie when it came out. The sequel, I was telling this to someone messaged me after I posted that I got the 4K, and then I posted a story with just a image of like the poster, and I think I was like 20 minutes into rewatching it. I was like, I forgot how absolutely absurd this movie is. I was like, it's fun. I was like, it's fun, but like plot holes galore, and it's absurd. And that's only 20 minutes into the movie. I mean, it's got some fun chase scenes. It's gory. It's definitely way different from the first movie. It's more
Does
of
it
like
bring back any original cast members?
Jennifer Love Hewitt. It's
Okay.
back in the second one. Sarah Michelle Gellar and Ryan Phillippe, they didn't survive the first movie, so they are not in it. And Freddie Prinze Jr. is in the sequel, but I don't know if he was filming like She's All That or something at the same time. He's not in it a lot.
Okay.
In fact, I feel like he's in his own separate movie that doesn't involve him being with most of the cast for most of the movie.
Okay.
But Mark messaged me, Mark J. Parker, who was also, this time period is
his bread and butter.
Great for it. Yeah, right. So he was like, dude, that movie turns 25 in November. Are you going to talk about it? And I was like, I don't know. It's fun, but I don't know if I want to like subject Jackson to that. Because even me back in the day when they came out in 98, so it was only a year after the first movie, that was like, how I said, like, oh, it's fun seeing Urban Legend. It was fun seeing Halloween H2O.
Right.
Disturbed Behavior, all fun, right? That was the first one in that time period where I was like, this isn't even fun. This is bad. This is like really, really, really bad. Now, I think years later, you can appreciate it for like being dumb fun.
Right.
Or whatever. And honestly, on Twitter, it has a fan base who's like, yeah, I know it's not as good as the original, but they have fun with it because it's, it's gory and like, and then some of the absurdity of it is like so much fun to make fun of. I think you get that kind of enjoyment out of it. But yeah, I don't know if I would subject you to
we can cross that bridge when we come to it if you decide you really want to cover it. I mean, having just seen it, I can't imagine the urge to rewatch it in a couple months' time will be that strong. But yeah, we can play it by ear. I don't really know what November off the top of my head. I can't think of November's anniversary calendar. So maybe if it's pretty light, but we can have a look at that later for sure. I haven't seen the first one in a long time, so I would at least consider doing that one.
So at least you've seen that. So I wasn't sure if you had seen the first one or not.
Long time ago, but yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, the sequel's definitely not good. Of course, episodes covering really bad movies can be fun too.
Oh, certainly. Absolutely.
But this is one, like, of course, that'd be another one again from the year that you were born that we're like, hey, watch this. I won't even lie to you and say that I thought it was good then. And I won't even hype it up. I was like, yep. I think when that camera came on, if we were to cover it, as soon as it came on and we're like, all right, let's start, I think in your face, it would already be like, that was terrible.
I'm pretty confident based on your anticipation of my viewing of it. Yeah, that it might be one to skip. But
but looks great. Looks great on 4K though. It looks like a brand new movie again. And I thought the same thing when the first one did their 25th anniversary 4K last year. Like it beautiful looking movies and not even that expensive. So I mean the fact that it still looks fresh. I just wish it was a better movie. But 98, 97, 98, Jennifer Love Hewitt was everywhere. And and I forget, I was like watching the sequel and I was like, you could tell when like certain movies, like the first one's made a lot of money. Everyone just looks a little bit better. They just kind of like, everyone's a little sexier just because, they have like a hit behind them. She looks great in the sequel. I mean, she already looks great.
Exactly.
In general. There's that. And of course they make an excuse to like have her in bikinis and like low cut tops for like, and it's raining a lot. It's raining a lot in the sequel. So there's that.
Okay.
So her white t-shirt's always wet.
Jeez, 90s and 2000s studio decisions are really shameless, aren't they?
Just blatantly be like,
it's such a different time. We feel like we're so far away from that period.
When we do the Texas Chainsaw remake, it's the same. Like they have Jessica Biel in like a white wife beater.
Yeah.
And it rains a lot towards the end of that movie too.
Okay.
And it's just like
funny you bring that up because when you said that you'd want that it looks good for being such on a modest budget, I was thinking the same thing. I'd watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original, last night, and that's a shoestring budget that I still find looks, just the cinematography of that movie makes no sense how good it really looks, but it just goes to show. I was talking to Cam about this today, about how it just goes to show you really don't need much of a budget for your movie really to capture it on camera and make it look amazing. Honestly, sometimes a low budget is an aid in that sort of way, just by it just looks so ethereal and raw. You're just like looking at the scenery and the characters through the camera in that movie with no effects behind it, and it just looks like you're there. It's incredible. So that was a great rewatch. I had watched it. I know I asked you. There was some confusion about what we were.
Because we were supposed to cover it today.
So I threw it, or I had it lined up to watch, thinking we were doing Texas Chainsaw today because I saw that it was the anniversary. And I was like, oh, is that what we're covering? And then I knew that Exorcist Believer was coming out on the 6th, so I thought maybe we were covering it on the following Monday. But I decided just to watch it anyway, and I skipped out on actually watching The Exorcist in anticipation for this episode because, as is the case for both of us, I've seen it so many times I can probably replay that movie in my head from scratch. But that was a great rewatch, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'd only seen it once before.
I learned from you because I didn't even know, because when you said like, oh, I saw something posted about an anniversary, and I was like, wait, what, the remake? I was like, no, and I didn't know that it came out on like October 1st, 1974. So yeah. I didn't know that it was actually, it's I guess 49th birthday,
right?
So I didn't even know that. So I mean, that's a good time to watch it.
Yeah, anyway. Exactly. It just felt right. That was another reason being like, oh, it's rare that I'll actually watch the movie on its anniversary, even when we're covering. So I was like, it just feels right. And it's 83 minutes. It took me no time at all. Yeah. I had a double feature yesterday. So
yeah, I'm going to watch, we have that episode coming up we're going to be talking about the original and the remake together, much like we did with, The Evil Dead, and then the Evil Dead remake that came out in 2013.
I'm very excited to cover that.
I'm doing it this time. This will be the first time, and I haven't done this. I want to watch the original and the remake back to back. I don't know why I've never done that before. They've always been like separate kind of views for me.
And that's how it's going to be for me, but I'm interested to see what you think about doing them back to back. That's a great idea.
Because I like the remake. I mean, I remember it ushered in that. We talk about like what kind of happens when these things are successful. That movie ushered in like, let's remake every horror movie now.
Yeah, and literally nothing was left untouched. No,
and a lot of those came from that same company that made it, Platinum Dunes, who Michael Bay and Andrew Form are the people that are behind that production company.
Interesting.
And they gave us, after that, it was the Amityville Horror, Friday the 13th. The Hitcher, they were involved in all those remakes, and then even the remake got a prequel. So like there was that too.
And it's a prequel I've seen. Yeah.
And you know what? I'm gonna watch that too, even though we're not gonna really talk about that movie on the episode.
May as well. Couldn't hurt.
I haven't watched it in a long time. I remember thinking it was perfectly fine, but it got a really poor reception compared to the 2003 movie. Okay. I remember thinking Jordana Brewster was cool in it. Like she was a good lead. Right. It had some really fun, gory horror movie stuff, probably stuff that you would love.
Yeah.
And I don't remember it being that awful, but like a lot of people were like, oh, that movie was terrible. But I kind of want to throw that one in too, even though we're not going to talk about it, but because I haven't watched it.
Couldn't hurt to bring up. I'm curious what you think about it. I mean, to each their own. Maybe you'll find it awesome. Doesn't mean that objectively it's bad. We'll see.
Right.
But on the topic of gore, though, another rewatch that I got, I won't spend too much time talking about it because I know we briefly covered it on one of our last episodes, but I did finally get my first watch of The Sadness in, Taiwanese, sort of a zombie movie. Yep. And I gotta say, and you said that you had seen it before, right?
Yeah.
And I know that's no secret. Like I like my movies gory and depraved, but I think that was probably as much as I can take. that movie it gives you everything that you could want out of a gore fest depraved zombie movie. I couldn't imagine they have done anything quote unquote worse, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Fantastic movie. I really, really enjoyed watching it, but oh my God, is it ever relentless in its depictions of violence and blood and guts. Holy smokes. More so than I could have imagined.
But in your wheelhouse.
In my wheelhouse for sure. And it satisfied on every measure. And it was funny because yesterday was a double feature. I watched that with Cam. And then later that night I'd watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And they're very opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to gore, which I thought is super funny because a movie like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre you'd expect to be super gory. But I can't remember if we talked about it before, but Toby Hooper, the director, obviously was going for that PG rating. I know it's not that much of a well-kept secret in the horror community. So I imagine that's why it's so deprived of actual blood and guts, but it was made up for in The Sadness. Do you remember that scene, the subway sequence where Buddy gets stabbed in the neck and then it's kind of like wiggled in there for a minute. And then when it's taken out, it's like a geyser of blood. It shoots to the ceiling of the subway.
It's almost comical, but
it is comical. I was laughing, but I was like, kind of like a nervous, like horrified sort of laugh. And I was like, that is like, it's almost like the amount of blood in like the Shining elevator sequence out of one person's neck. It was incredible. That whole sequence was great and shot on a set too. They recreated that subway set. They couldn't film on a subway, I guess, in Taipei. So they built that set, and same with the hospital sequences are on a built set as well on a studio, which I thought were great because they both looked super authentic. But yeah, the sadness for those, and I know viewers that listen to our previous episode, but if you are looking for something to watch, that if that's up your alley, that sort of thing, then yeah, highly recommend. Great foreign horror watch and fit really well into the horror spooky season schedule. But yeah, I'm sure I'd see it again in the future, but not anytime soon.
Yeah, I probably should check that again. It's been a bit. Speaking, because we talked about that movie a little bit when we were talking about the whale, when we were doing the whaling, right?
Yes, that's right.
And I'm going to mention this now. I don't know what caused it on Good Pods. That episode shot up 30 spots on the top 100 episodes.
Oh my god! Okay.
Randomly, I don't know
okay. Wow.
how what happened. But thank you. And at one point, we had all 3 of our Tales of Horror episodes on the top 100 episodes. So thank you for that too.
That's awesome
as well.
Nice.
The Urban Legend one was doing pretty well the last time I looked, and then Cabin Fever was like right on its tails, and then then the Wailing were just there because they had fallen out because it's been a little bit since that episode came out,
right?
And a lot of those episodes they like do really well for like a week or a little bit after that, and then they start to slip. But like it's always interesting when they pop back up. For whatever that reason was, I don't know, but
people maybe binging if they're catching up. That's whatever the reason.
That's cool.
All the power to it. That's awesome. Good for us.
For sure. We want to mention one more thing before we get into talking about The Exorcist, which, by the way, I had to message Jackson about like, all right, well, it turns 50 in December, or do we just use it now because like the new one's coming out?
Yes,
it was a little bit of a tough call. I guess we wouldn't be like too keen on talking about a movie like this during the holiday season,
right?
Even though we're gonna do like The Faculty in December, right? But that's just a fun horror movie. It's not like The Exorcist. So we did decide that it was best to put it here instead of like in December.
What an odd December release in the first place.
I know, really crazy to go see that around then. But before I get to the movie, I just want to update on the Halloween news that we talked about last week on the last episode. Really quick, we talked about there being a bidding war in Hollywood about the franchise rights. And maybe a day or two after that story broke, they clarified a little bit what that all kind of means. So Miramax co-owns the rights right now with Malik Akkad's production company. Malik Akkad was the son of Mustafa Akkad, who put up a lot of the money when the original Halloween came out. And probably more than John Carpenter after the first one came out. Mustafa Akkad was the biggest champion cheerleader for Michael Myers. He was like one of those people that was like, you can do whatever you want, but you just cannot chop off his head. You can't like really kill him. Like,
that
he
was thrown out the window, wasn't it? Oh.
Yeah, I know. And then they were like, all right, yeah, you can have your chop off the head moment in H2O, but you're going to clarify what that was when we make another one.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
It wasn't really him.
Well, I like his vision of Michael Myers. I did not know that about him. But I'm on that train too. I never wanted to see Michael Myers die or be incapacitated by any means. So I can appreciate that.
Yeah. So sadly, Mustafa Akkad passed away during a terrorist attack. Actually, I think in Turkey. Like he was in like I think he was in a hotel with his daughter, and died very tragically. And there was a lot of like talk about like who would take over after that. And of course, his son Malik did, and he's been the main one, kind of spearheading the rights and what happens with Halloween after his father passed away. And he once the franchise kind of dead after Resurrection, there was Rob Zombie then remade Halloween, and then we got Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, which I am going to watch. I decided during the spooky season I'm going to try to get through it again.
Yeah. I can't wait for that because I do like the first. Oh, I might even too. I have a lot of Halloween on my schedule this month.
Yeah.
But I'd like to find time to squeeze in his too.
Yeah.
That's awesome that you're watching them though.
And then, then after that, it seemed like that franchise was dead again. And then of course Blumhouse came in with Universal. They signed this kind of special, like kind of sweetheart 3-picture deal where, Blumhouse and Universal could release Halloween 2018 and Kills and Ends. And then, Ends ended that last year. And now the rights are kind of up in the air again. But the one thing that we didn't clarify before is that Miramax still co-owns the movie rights. So if they decide to go on the movie idea train, they would be kind of co-owners of it with whoever, if it's Paramount, whatever studio gets the film rights. But Akkad is very, I guess, keen on his main priority is TV and television. If he hears a really good movie pitch, I guess that they would be down to like also look into.
So it's on the table,
right? And the TV, I think because it, like you said, like we've already had like 3 movies. The last one came out last year. We've had a lot of Halloween on the big screen,
right?
And television seems like the next logical step. I mean, to kind of downsize it, but still make it viable if it's a really good story and kind of like expand on whatever mythology you want to expand on. But the people in the lead for that rights are the company is A24, which is exciting for us. I saw some people online that were like, no, they're gonna make it so hoity-toity and like
all the power to them. I can't wait to see what that studio does with it if they do end up acquiring the rights, because they would be my front runner. Even though I was saying last week when we were talking about this, it doesn't really seem like it's in their wheelhouse, like this big, huge established IP. I still am excited to see what they do with that. I mean, and they do have the Friday the 13th show, which kind of is what compounds my excitement for if they do get the Halloween rights. But yeah, that's fantastic. So it's between them and Miramax, right? They're still duking it out.
Miramax is second, and of course they would love to have the TV and film, like be a part of the film rights too. But right now, everything, like we said last week, is on the table as far as, any good idea. If it's film, cool. If it's TV. But apparently his priority, he really would like to see a viable TV show, which is, I think, kind of what he's focused on. When I found out that A24 was in the lead for that, I was like, all right, more power to them on getting a TV show made. I don't need another movie. I mean, I'd see it, of course.
Sure.
But
I'm not exactly excited for that prospect, but I'm with you.
But like, it's not like, Halloween 2018 kills and ends. Like they all came out so quick to one another. And like, it'll be 5 years for that 2018 movie. I think soon, like it released sometime in October when it came out in 2018. And it doesn't seem like it was that long ago. I mean, that it really did happen. I think TV is the best place for it. They had that big Halloween convention over the weekend, and I don't think any news came out of that at all. So I thought that maybe there would have been something, but I guess not much like to really say yet. But yeah, A24 currently in the lead for that. Film is still an option, but it looks like TV is the next logical step. They did kind of squash one rumor, but I think people want this rumor to be true, is that the focus was like more on a TV show based on like the Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, which is like, that was the one movie that was not about Michael Myers. It was a different story. That's when John Carpenter wanted to make just like an anthology movie series like every year. Okay. And that was hard to do after you had 2 movies with Michael Myers, because it confused the audience when they went to go see the third movie, and they're like, this isn't only in name only was it Halloween. It was a completely different story and everything. Okay. But that movie has found fans over the years, and people like it for it on its own. And I think people were really looking forward to a TV show that kind of expanded on that mythology. But I don't think this one guy said, I think best on Twitter. He said, yes, Halloween 3 has fans now and is very much more respected now compared to when it came out in 83 or 82 around then. But I think what we learned from that is people want Michael Myers no matter. And I think we've learned that with Halloween Ends. Like people want Michael Myers and not someone pretending to be him or anything like that. So you're like, I think it's hard to kind of have a Halloween project without him. And I think no matter how much you might want a TV show based on Season of the Witch, Michael Myers is the selling point. He's the face of it. Certainly. So it's hard to like, I think, go off that. But yeah, excited for A24. I mean, I know we said, because we were talking about the film rights, I was like, I think the film rights would be really expensive for A24.
A little bit out of their reach, maybe.
But not TV. So like that, I actually think it's cool. I know, I mean, we had Red Fox on our show from the Super Slash Bros. He had his feelings about A24. I actually saw some of the stuff that they're like post like a horror movie opinion that, and it has that picture of like the animated dude with all the knives like coming toward him, like that makes people like come at you like this. And that was one of what he put, like that he thinks A24 is like really pretentious and like. So yeah, there are other people that feel that way. I mean, I saw people that weren't excited that A24 could get the TV rights because they're like,
and that would be
that's not their
disappointing.
Halloween, but I don't even know what they mean though. Like because it's not like the first movie is a prestige film anyway, but like the first film is a viable movie. Like you would, I feel like you would want a viable like production company to like have the rights to like to make something good, like really good, rather than just like a random chase and stalk movie with like, I mean, a lot of mindless gore and nothing to it. Yeah, right.
This could be an opportunity maybe for A24 because as far as I understand, beside Friday the 13th rights aside, they've never made something produced or distributed of an IP of this magnitude. So maybe they will try to appeal more to the mainstream kind of Halloween movies and to the fans that come along with that IP that are going to be watching it that might not necessarily dig the pretentious vibes of like A24 films. So maybe they will kind of make it more accessible that way. Who knows? Like regardless, I'm excited to see what they do with it, and I'm sure I'm just going to like it regardless, but time will tell. I mean, I'm hoping it at least takes a couple of years for them to develop because I feel like we need, especially after Ends last year, just a breather would be nice. But yeah, no, I'm still stoked. Again, to clarify, I would be totally fine if we don't get another Halloween anytime soon, but if we're going to, this is the direction that I want it to go. So that is exciting, I guess.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too. So we'll see. We'll update you on if should they actually
finally
obtain the
some
rights.
news coming out.
I know.
Now the strike is
and also horror related too. So that made it makes it good.
Exactly.
And on that note, Tales of Horror continues with us talking about The Exorcist, 1973 supernatural horror film, widely considered by a lot of people to be the scariest movie of all time, or one of them.
Hey, where'd this come from?
I found it.
Well, let's both play it. You really don't want me to play?
Captain Howdy said no.
Who's Captain Howdy?
You're gonna die up there.
I need reassignment.
You're the best we've got.
I think I've lost my faith.
Is there someone inside you?
Sometimes.
Who is it?
I don't know.
Is it Captain Howdy?
You ever heard of exorcism?
How do you go about getting an exorcism?
I beg your pardon? I'm Damien Karras. I'd like to help you. Where's Reagan?
In here with us.
I believe we should begin. Avoid conversations where the demon. The demon is a liar. He will mix lies with the truth.
Why, Dimmy?
To attack us. Do not listen.
That thing isn't my daughter.
It is he who commands you. The power of Christ compels you.
What an excellent day for an exorcism.
What are your thoughts on that?
Talk about I think I feel like more watching Halloween, but that's different. I mean, but when I was watching this before we got on, there is a lot of disturbing stuff in this movie that like it's hard to like. I was trying to think of it watching it today, being in the mindset of seeing it in like 1973 and being like, what in the hell is this? Like this is a lot, and for my fragile 1973 brain to handle right now, like never seen anything like this before. Probably, I think people when that movie came out, my mom just told me that story again that they actually did pass out like vomit bags when she went to go see it in theaters.
That is awesome that she got to see it in theaters.
It advised women who were pregnant not to see it. Like it was like a lot of stuff, and it was considered very controversial, but also broke a lot of ground in like a lot of different ways because I mean it was the first I think horror movie to be recognized in a significant way by the Academy, like
Right.
Best Picture nomination, a nomination for Linda Blair for Best Supporting Actress. Ellen Burstyn was nominated for Best Actress.
I think it had 9 noms in total, right? And it won.
I think
two.
it won Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Sound,
Right.
which makes sense when you're watching it and listening to all the things that's going on with it. And it was the highest rated R-rated film, unadjusted for inflation, until it came out in theaters. So it's a huge movie. Like we said, it can't believe that it was released on December 26th. So like a day after Christmas. A day after Christmas.
Right.
But we wanted to talk about it because of course, this week The Exorcist Believer is coming out. So like, don't know what's gonna happen. I'll know tomorrow. As of this, we're recording on a Monday. I'm seeing it Tuesday. If that movie is good,
if it can hold the flame
if it can hold any flame.
edgy.
But what we've learned, I think, from watching this movie and talking about it is it's a tough act to follow, and so many people have tried either with direct sequels or just other movies that deal with demonic possession. Like they all feel like derivative of this.
Yes.
It's hard to top, I think. But I do kind of like, if you can remember, what it was like for you when you first saw. When did you first see it? And what you thought of it then?
I've always loved this movie since my first watch of it. It would be hard for me to pinpoint when exactly that was. At least in the ballpark of, I was in high school, probably grade 11 or 12. But this movie, like for, I'm sure, countless others who had seen it the first time, the reputation of this movie long preceded my first viewing of it. This was the movie that for years and years you would see on the covers of DVDs of other horror movies saying scariest movie since The Exorcist. Like this is the movie that horror movies aspire to be as scary as, or as well helmed as. And so it had that, I guess, big shoes to fill by the time I had gone around to seeing it, because when I was still coming around to movies, this was one of those seminal horror movies I wanted to cross off my list as soon as possible. And I remember picking up my DVD of this one, and I've always been so transfixed of the shot on the DVD cover of Max von Sydow's character bathed in the eerie glow of the street lamp looking up at the window. It's one of my favorite shots just in cinema in general. I mean, I'm not breaking any ground by saying that. It's a lot of people love that shot, but just from in my youth, picking up and browsing the DVD, I've always thought that was such an awesome, iconic cover and shot in the movie. And so seeing it happen later in the movie too was like a moment I always relish when I'm watching that movie. But yeah, I think I was probably grade 11 or 12 when I'd first seen it and loved it. I even notably, and I'm like ashamed at how I was a little bit hesitant to really love older movies when I was first getting into like film. I mean, I would not, there was some that really didn't bother me how old they were. I would love them regardless, but there's a lot of movies that I'd watched when I was younger that I didn't appreciate because they were older. And, you know, as I've matured and the more movies I watch, that opinion has always changed. But The Exorcist was one of those ones where from the get-go, loved this movie. It's since become one of my favorite movies of all time, horror genre aside. And that kind of led to my decision to not watch it this time around, because I do want to spread out my watches. I've seen it several times in recent years, and you know how it is, like with movies, you kind of wear yourself out no matter how good a movie is. There are some that will never be touched, like The Thing, which I rewatched recently. I could watch that movie every day probably and love it, but I just didn't want to wear myself out, so that's why I took some time off from watching it again. I do plan on watching the third one and maybe Paul Schrader's Dominion too sometime soon, because this is the only Exorcist movie in the franchise, which is weird to say. I feel like this is one of those movies that should have been a standalone, but it's the only Exorcist movie I've seen. So it'll be interesting going right into Believer as like a direct sequel. I can be excited about that, I guess. But yeah, no, I've loved this movie for a lot of years. I'm sure I will watch it several more times throughout my life, and I look forward to it every time. It's one that I enjoy showing people for the first time too, because 50 years old and it still is doing it like no other horror movie has done since. I would say Hereditary has come close, and it borrows a lot from this movie too, and that movie is very well regarded too. A lot of movies aspire to be like The Exorcist, and that just goes to show how amazing it really is all these years later. But yeah, undoubtedly one of my favorites. But do you remember your first experience with this movie?
I was pretty young when I saw it, but you know what I'll say? Like the watch that I remember more than when I watched it for the first time as a kid was when they released this movie, re-released it in theaters. I think when I was maybe a sophomore or junior in high school.
Yes, and they added a few things.
And they added, it was like a director's cut and all that.
Yes.
That was my first experience with that movie where like you see it with a crowd, and you know how like I think sometimes when you're like younger watching an older movie, like there'd be like, oh, you can make fun of things or like, oh, like that looks so cheesy, this and that.
Right.
That wasn't the vibe when we saw that in theaters. There was this genuine like still shock,
terror,
and it's associated with it. And then like some of the stuff that you were seeing in that movie that was just like, I can't believe they got away with that, or were able to do it. Yeah. And that was the watch that I remember the most. And
I'm super jealous you saw that in theaters. That is awesome.
Like it's a great movie. Even watching it today, it's just really well structured and put together. And I love how it just kind of slowly builds to, of course there's a lot of like stuff that goes on with Reagan that starts kind of small and then like, it of course escalates and gets bigger and bigger. And, before like, she starts to deteriorate and like, she's just not even the same girl anymore as we see, late in the movie. But it's even that stuff, the quiet stuff that I was like paid attention to more watching it today, where, I think I mentioned when we were talking about like, oh, like shouldn't Linda Blair be in the Exorcist Believer? She might be in it. We don't know for sure yet.
Okay.
She might have some kind of small part in it, and we were like, well, why did they get like, why Ellen Burstyn and Chris McNeil? Like, why her? Like, it feels like it happened to Reagan. It was Reagan's body, that got, kind of taken advantage of. And like, in that story, like, shouldn't she be the one that you bring back? But then I was watching it today and watching what the mother goes through too is also pretty, it's a huge ordeal. I mean, like, to kind of see her like in this really desperate, I don't know what to do. Even by the time she even gets to a point where it's like, okay, this is not a problem with her brain. This isn't like, this isn't neurological. There's something else going on. And like we watched her go through all these other avenues. And then when she finally gets to the whole, like, maybe we need the help of Jesus, basically she's worn so out at that point. Like, she's been beaten down by this thing that she can't control and doesn't know what to do to stop it. I actually felt, I've seen the movie a lot, but I actually felt for her in a much different way watching it this time.
Is that right?
Than I've had like in past viewings of it.
She's almost equally as helpless as Reagan, really, just in a different sort of way. But yeah, I can only imagine like how mothers view this movie too, like knowing what Reagan's going through and feeling like not being able to help your child go through something so horrific is probably even a bigger impact on them. But no, Chris McNeil's character is amazing in this movie too. All the characters are really done well, all the central ones too. Damian Karras, played by, what's his name? I just have Jason Miller. Yeah, in his film debut too, which is, I didn't know that until today when I was doing some research.
I did not know that either. I also did not know that he is he's Jason Patrick's dad, and I had no idea who is
Jason Patrick.
He plays Michael in The Lost Boys. He's the older brother.
Wow!
I did not know that, and I was like, oh, that's cool. That's a fun little like movie, little connection history to have. But yeah, I didn't know that either about Jason Miller. Also didn't know there are a lot of people we got in the movie. Ellen Burstyn, mainly Ellen Burstyn, Linda Blair, and then his role in particular. Like, the studio pushed back on a lot of, they wanted names, and they were like very much like, I think for like for Ellen Burstyn's part, they looked at like Audrey Hepburn at one point,
right? Ooh, that would awesome.
Anne Bancroft, Jane Fonda. They also looked at Carol Burnett because William Friedkin believed that she could be dramatic and not just a comedic performer. Like, he thought that she'd be really good, but the studio was like, no, we don't want her either.
Okay.
And then Ellen Burstyn, I guess when she told William Friedkin that she was destined to play that part, he was like, okay, like the confidence in wanting to get it made him want to cast her. But I guess the head of the studio was like did not want her because she wasn't like a huge name, like
Right.
huge in the same league as like Audrey Hepburn or Anne Bancroft or Jane Fonda. And you know, same thing with like there's just a lot of convincing with a lot of these people that he ended up casting. Reagan being the most difficult part, I guess, because there is a lot of debate over she needs to be 12 or in that age range,
right?
But there's also stuff that she's doing in this movie that a 12-year-old really shouldn't be doing. So the studio was also kind of scared, like cast someone a little older, maybe can play younger, and he was like, "That's not going to really work." And I guess like it's interesting because like the quote that when William Friedkin met Linda Blair, who actually our only credit is like a soap opera credit at this point, and she was modeling. She wasn't like a big child actress by any means, but when she went in for The Exorcist, and he said that he went with her because she was smart but not precocious, cute but not beautiful, a normal, happy 12-year-old girl. And then he asked her if she knew what The Exorcist was about, and she told him she read the book, and she said it's about a little girl who gets possessed by the devil and does a whole bunch of bad things. And then Franken then asked her what she meant, and then she got specific and said she pushes a man out of her bedroom window and she hits her mother across the face and she masturbates with a crucifix. And then Franken asked her if she knew what masturbation meant, and she said it's like jerking off, isn't it? ? And giggled. And then he says, "Okay, have you ever done that?" And then she says, "Sure, haven't you?" But also is responding as a child would respond to it. So
right,
he said so that made her like she was smart enough to understand what the subject matter was.
Okay,
but still had this kind of like childlike
innocence
to her.
Yeah,
that made it work for her, like because you have to really get to know her as that first before even you as a viewer is like, oh, like you're watching this girl gradually turn into this thing that's far different from you know the girl we met earlier in the movie. And I think that is important, I guess, to kind of have someone that hit that kind of like childlike stuff that he needed to hit.
She does a fantastic job. It doesn't feel like she's selling us her innocence before she becomes corrupted by this demon inside her. Like I think it just comes across as a very naturalistic portrayal of this just innocent young girl who's soon to be at battle with the ultimate evil, and she does a fantastic job of and I think that's credit to the writing as well, and just the scenes that we do see of her before things really take a turn. But yeah, Linda Blair's performance, probably my favorite in the movie. I would say it's one of the most dynamic, even though it's kind of a, I don't know if controversy is the right word. There was some controversy, but it's I guess it involved more people, I guess, than you'd think.
It did. And I guess this is a good time to bring that up because we're talking about her performance. Like she ended up getting nominated for an Academy Award, and I've seen some stuff where like, I mean, mostly people who are like opinion pieces on it, whether or not that was a deserving nomination. Like how much did she do?
Right.
And because you have Mercedes McCambridge, who is doing the voice of the devil that's possessing her. And that is in large part a lot of what we hear in the movie, and that is what it works. It's most of the performance is that towards the end, at least. I mean, like once she fully like is like, when your face starts to deteriorate and she's fully like possessed, it's mostly that performer doing the voice. Occasionally, she goes back and forth between using like Reagan's voice, of course, and then of course she's also imitating like Father Karras' dead mother and like a bunch of other stuff that happens, right? And then I guess Eileen Dietz is another one who is 15 years older than Linda Blair, who did, I guess, some of the more physical stuff.
Right. But
apparently not a lot. I mean, I guess it depends on who you believe. Like, I think they believe that she was 17 seconds of actual screen time in the film that they used her for. And then when she kind of was publicly upset that they minimalized her contribution to it, they looked into it again. And I guess because she said, instead of saying that she did some of the possession scenes, she said she did all of them. And so then they have to go back and look at it. And they still said that Warner Brothers measured her screen presence at 28.25 seconds after that. And then, but still denied that her contribution was dramatically significant to Linda Blair's overall performance. I guess knowing all that, like, how do you feel about Linda Blair's contribution to it is still huge, even if you take into account that 2 other people were used to
Right.
create the full picture of that performance, I guess.
Certainly, yeah. I think the credit is mostly hers and is deserving. I think I know there was a little bit of a complaint from Mercedes. What was her last name?
McCambridge.
About her credit for the voice work. Supposedly, William Friedkin said that she was willing to provide the voice work without the credit, and then that changed after the film's success. She wanted more credit, and I think Warner Bros. Bent the knee a little bit to her and gave her that. I guess I've never really considered the stunt actress and her contribution to the role until today. I was reading a little bit about that, but regardless, it's really Linda Blair's show. You're seeing she's doing a lot of the physical acting. She's the one that we're seeing, even with the effects and the voice work kind of edited in amidst her performance. It's really her show. She's the vehicle, I guess, from which we are experiencing the possession. And I think, the credit really should be mostly hers. And I think that's kind of, she got the nomination to secure that. It's a shame. I know that this controversy at the time probably really contributed to her not winning that race at the Oscars.
I think that probably would have been like a big factor.
Do you know who did win supporting that year?
I can look it up while we're talking. I don't know. I can look it up right now.
I'm trying to.
And also, if you're wondering, if people are wondering what Dietz actually did, what contributions wise, it's parts of the crucifix scene. I guess we'll talk about a little bit. It's a pretty disturbing scene. And then the fist fight with Father Karras towards the end, right at the end of the movie, before he throws himself out the window once the devil possesses him. And then I guess other like more violent. They said anything that was disturbingly violent, but they said that 28.25 seconds. If you're going with the 17 or the 28.25, that's not a lot of screen time. That Linda Blair did a lot of the physical work too.
Exactly.
She
and
definitely did definitely do a lot of the thrashing around the bed stuff that, she talked about, I think we talked about in other episodes where we kind of brought up The Exorcist. This is the 70s, like old school filming where there's no way that a child should have been put through some of the stuff that she was put through on this. And I know she looks back on that and, she said very nice things after William Friedkin passed away. And her experience making The Exorcist, I guess maybe over time you kind of can reconcile like what that all is as an adult. But there's no way that a child should have been put through most of the stuff that she was put through on that without even kind of, I think, being a little bit more like, hey, we should be gentle here. But they also said like they would call cut and she would, be a kid. And like, it was like, oh, like she was kind of giggling around and like, whatever. But awesome. it's still like a lot. And I know, like, just using this as an example too, Ellen Burstyn, that scene where she gets smacked after the crucifix scene and she makes her mother lick her and she picks her up and like slaps her across the face. Yeah. Ellen Burstyn really fucked up her back in that scene. And that shot of pain that you see, that's the shot they use. and it was like permanent like damage too.
Permanent spinal cord damage, She still to this day is suffering from it. And I think Linda Blair too, actually. In another scene in the bed thrashing scene, like where she's like basically folding up and down, she hurt her back quite badly during that as well. Part of what I meant earlier by the reputation in this movie preceding it, I remember older friends and siblings of my buddies talking about like the curse of this movie's production and how X number of people like died during filming and afterwards.
Oh, like the whole like Exorcist curse.
Exactly. That was something I was well aware of when watching it for the first time. And there was a certain aura around the movie where I was kind of like nervous while watching it about like, is this movie like carry something with it? But yeah, no secret about the antics on set, people being injured, all in total, during production and shortly after, 9 people associated with the movie all died, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, they got a notorious production history for sure, which I find it's like tragic that this stuff happened, but adds to the allure of the movie and its legacy after all these years.
Definitely. Oh, and I found out this is so strange too. Like in 1974, you had 2 child actors that were nominated for Best Supporting Actress. Tatum O'Neal was a child actress. She won for Paper Moon over Linda Blair for The Exorcist, but they were both very young. So I think it's interesting that year you had two very young people being nominated for Oscars. I don't take this away from Linda Blair at all. I think there's stuff in before the full possession stuff that she does that's clearly her. That is good. That is very good, and you buy it and you believe it, and I would never take that. I think it's a great performance. I think her and Ellen Burstyn are very good in the movie. I mean, everyone's good that has a lead role in it.
Their chemistry in particular, though, is spot on. Yeah,
but they're very solid together, and I know Ellen Burstyn was very motherly towards her while they were making it, and that shows in their chemistry and their relationship in it. But yeah, like Linda Blair deserves all the praise that you can get for something like this. I think she deserves it. I don't think a lot of kid actors would have even the mental capacity to play this and sell it the way that she did.
Right.
I mean, and not because just because you're not young. I think it's hard to really convey that. But like he said, she was smart enough to understand the material, but still was a child, and that was what he needed. He needed someone that got it, but also had that childlike innocence, so we could actually feel for her, for what she goes through.
Yeah.
My friend wanted me to bring this up. I thought this was when the possession happens, but he's like, maybe I was just not paying attention, or like maybe I thought the moment was too obvious, and he wants to know exactly when she becomes possessed in the movie. There's that whole thing with the Ouija board and the whole Captain Howdy thing. I assumed it was there.
Right, that's my interpretation as well.
And I can't think of any
answers.
I can't think of any other time. Well, there are people that get much deeper into like the psychology of this, because they were like,
yes,
there was one thing I read where they're like, oh, it's a 12-year-old girl, and she's going through puberty, and she masturbates for the first time, and that's when the devil possesses her. Even though we don't see that, they really get into the whole like her growing up and that phase of her, which is I guess an interesting idea too. That that would be the case as well. And also, I guess also in the book, they make everything that she goes through, I guess, is more ambiguous, where it could be explained as she's possessed by the devil, and this has something to do with that. But also all the stuff that leads up to it could have been some kind of medical condition where it's like, oh, like she's growing up, she's going through puberty, is this, is that, like, that's what the book kind of does. And it kind of towed that line of like, yeah, it could be this, or it could also be that.
I like that ambiguity. I think that would be.
I do too. I think the movie kind of touches on it a little bit, but not as much as maybe the book does. Because I know, some of those scenes where they're taking her in, and they're like, this is like a mind thing, and the mom is like, no, like the bed was like thrashing up and down, like even with me on it, like this is not something to do with like her brain, right? But when you can't really explain it as a medical professional, like what's going on with her, I guess you would be like, something must be wrong up here,
right?
And but yeah, I do like that kind of ambiguity in the book where it's like, oh, like, well, it can't be kind of a real world, this could be this or it could be that.
Yeah, and I find most horrors, I think, are benefited when there is some ambiguity involved. So I would totally read this book. I don't know why I haven't made the time to do it yet, but I'm told, actually, speaking about the novel, that even the movie, for as grotesque and intimate it is detailed, apparently the book, it's particularly the crucifix masturbation scene, apparently is far worse in the book than you even see on screen, which is hard to imagine, because that scene, that's a standout scene from my first watch. I remember I knew about it going in because I had done preliminary, I just seen stuff from movie accounts and whatnot, but I remember watching it and like my jaw hitting the ground and being like, I've never seen this in a movie before. That is absurdly crazy.
It just gets worse when she has her mom. She throws her mom's head down. The first time I saw that scene, I was like, oh, this movie's not safe at all. Like,
no, it really doesn't hold back, and I appreciate that about it.
And I imagine, right? So you get I think in the movie, you get two that you see, like where it's like where you can clearly see what she's doing, and then it just kind of cuts to her like saying like let Jesus fuck you like over and over again. So you don't see anymore after that, but you still see her hand going up and down.
Oh yeah, and there's enough visual details there.
The way it was described in the I heard from the book, where it's like it's more grotesque she actually achieves orgasm too. It's an actual like sexual scene, and on top of that, I was like, yeah, you don't, I didn't need that. You don't need it. You can see enough, I think.
There's no way that would have flown. I'm surprised. Apparently this movie got the R rating without any cuts necessary, which is like, that's what I read on IMDb anyway, which is fucking incredible. Like,
and there's certain movies that like struggle with the MPAA. You're like,
literally, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre comes out the next year, and that I think Tobe Hooper had to like fight tooth and nail to get the R rating down from the X. And that movie has no gore in it at all. There's literally two scenes with blood in it.
Exactly. And I know we'll talk about this when we cover it, but a lot of people say the power in that movie is that it makes you think you're seeing something gorier and grotesque than it is. Like when you're watching it, it feels like this feels dirtier and meaner than it is. But that's just because it's the way it's shot, the way it looks. I mean, it looks, but yeah, there is very little blood in it at all. But the deaths in it are so like iconic and like kind of like they feel painful, like when they fucking hang this girl on the meat hook, like that is like but yeah, it is interesting that that a year later he
I couldn't believe
fight tooth and nail.
I just couldn't believe reading that,
like,
that it didn't require any cuts or any like serious editing down considering the material. And you'd think that apparently supposedly Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert both really like this movie, and normally they are very much anti depiction horror in general, and like depictions of like violence and like the horrible things involving kids. They're very not on board with, but they both gave this movie like thumbs up, 4 stars. So it's just weird how this movie just didn't seem to apply to the typical critical consensus that other movies probably would have been subjected to in and around this period. It's funny how this movie seems to just stand above the rest. I know the professionalism of the adaptation and the subject matter has always been hailed amongst critics, even though like there's not to say that there's not people out there that probably laud this movie over its absurdism and whatnot. But it seems like generally it was like regarded very, very highly.
I regard it.
Yeah.
And I think it's just a good example too, when you have a good relationship between director and screenwriter. I mean, of course, like based on like his book, right? So like that is, you want that if you're lucky enough to have like the person who wrote the source material also write the screenplay and then be heavily involved in production, that helps, goes a long way to how these things pan out. And like they do talk about certain things that were changed from the book to film, but a lot of that had to do with like just it being a lot. It would have been probably hard to maintain that R rating if they kept some of the stuff. They said in the book that certain character like that you get more of like the people that live with like servants and Chris that live with Chris and all that. You have more of them in the book.
Okay.
More details. You have more details about Reagan's father, I guess, in the book too. But yeah, I mean, not necessarily I missed in this though, or like it felt like he needed it more.
No, I think the screenplay does a great job at fluffing down. I don't know if that's a right word, but like trimming the fat.
There you go.
We only really get important things.
Fluffing down works.
I'd never considered that before. That's the first time I've ever used that. But there was one detail I read today when just like prepping for the episode that I thought was super cool. I had never noticed before, but supposedly Reagan's father's name is Howard. And so the name that the demon presents itself with when she's using the Ouija board being Captain Howdy is like, I guess, an attempt by it to earn her trust and sort of like subliminally connect it with like a fatherly figure, like somebody that she can trust and befriend. Thought that was a really cool detail. I never really considered where that name Captain Howdy came from, but supposedly it's supposed to be derivative of her father's name. And I'm like, oh, that's a cool detail. There's a lot more to this movie than meets the eye.
So the devil's presence is it already there? Like, because like you have all that stuff early on when we first get introduced to like the family and all that, and you're like, you hear the stuff in the attic, which she thinks is rats, right? And the guy's like, no, I just cleaned up there, and then she makes that kind of comment like, well, maybe they're clean rats or whatever. So I'm assuming the devil's presence is already there. I mean, like that stuff in the attic, it's definitely not rats. Like that was something going on. Like
exactly. If I had a gripe with this movie, and I'm fine that we don't see it because I adore ambiguity, but I would like, or I think it could be benefited to see like how the demon does end up coming from Iraq to, suburban Pennsylvania. I don't know how that is or if it is portrayed. I missed it. I've never really been certain as to how it ends up in the O'Neill's house, but
I watched it today, and like, unless you guys who listen can fill it in, we get all that stuff that happens in Iraq when we get introduced to like Father Marin, and and those scenes are important because there is a connection, but you really don't. There really is no clearly obvious transition to like, oh, this is where this is going here. I didn't see it today, but
that being said, there is a lot of evidence that points that it is there long, like before symptoms are really being shown of Regan being possessed in the Ouija board. There's some shots, if you like adjust the brightness, there are some dark shots of the house where if you dial the brightness up on your screen, you can see like the statue of Pazuzu, like the demon in the darkness, which you can't see unless you alter your brightness, which is like super cool subliminal messaging. But yeah, there's a lot of evidence, many more examples that I'm forgetting that I read about today that seemed he was there before he really shows himself, which I thought is super freaky.
Yeah, that is freaky. Also too, and this is more of like I guess just a question as a viewer from me to you. What is the devil's end game with possessing her? Because like, when they asked, I think Father Karras asked how long does he plan on like staying in Regan, right? And he basically says till she lies stinking and rotting in the earth. So is it I always wonder if there's more to like why the devil is possessing her, and like, or if it's just because like it's there is some like kind of sick joy and like kind of degrading this little girl's innocence and like having like that be what the main motivation is more than anything.
I've always understood it, and I'm sure there's multiple interpretations. I'm sure William Peter Blatty has an idea of what he thinks the end goal is, but I've always looked at it as like the demon is just trying to erode faith in God and Christianity by picking, like, it's the ultimate battle between pure evil and pure innocence, right? And how could something so loving and innocent be so horrendously corrupted by this figure? I think the idea is to just, again, crush that faith. And I love that dichotomy of the trauma that the O'Neills are going through, and how that's contrasted, or I guess kind of blends in with Father Karras's lack of faith, because we see him struggling with his faith throughout the movie, and this is kind of like his opportunity to help this family, and he's an easy target too for this for the demon,
and he knows it.
Exactly.
Knows it, yeah.
So it's kind of like a redemption for him too, when he ultimately, I guess, uses his makes the ultimate sacrifice in the end to save Regan, as we viewers of the movie will know. But yeah, I've always looked at it as just like the demon is there to just spread as much harm as possible and try and lose people's faith in God.
All right, so that was the vibe the kind of vibe I was getting at. I mean, I guess you have to just look at it too as like this self-contained story within the confines of that house and this family and these two priests. Eventually, I guess there it doesn't have to be much bigger than like I said, like making people question their faith by completely degrading and and like really like using this girl, like, I mean, it, like the most innocent thing that in the world that are children, like they have, like, they really if you're lucky enough with most of them, they really don't have like this predestined nature to kind of be like evil or mean or like anything like that.
Which is why they're such a good target for evil,
right? So then you have this thing, like, for all intents and purposes, what we know of Regan is that she's a typical, very well-adjusted young girl with no real issues at all until this thing possesses her. So yeah, I like that answer. I think that is pretty much why this happens to this particular family and why it happens to Regan. I also love the thing you said about the thing with the dad, because I didn't even notice pay attention to that.
Super sick detail. I never, like I said, I never realized that until
and today. That would, like, I guess make because if you're really detailing, if you're really like maybe overthink how the devil is able to like almost trick her, especially with playing the game and stuff like that. I imagine like the whole possession thing is not just a straight like I'm entering this girl's body and that's it. I feel like there's more of like a little bit of like a psychological warfare that kind of goes on where like he needs to almost like convince her this is someone that maybe you care about, something that I'm not evil, that kind of thing.
Right.
Before it's completely too late. And I think that is kind of, it makes the movie a lot more interesting too. Like there's, it's not just this quick kind of like this, we play this game, then this is what, that's when it happened.
Exactly. Just to add to that too, I think a feature common with a lot of possession movies is like, especially the Conjuring series does this great. There's a scene when the Warrens are talking about what sort of people are targeted by demonic entities, and it's those that are going through struggles that are more susceptible to like welcoming it in their life. And I guess we see that through subliminally. It's not necessarily that big of a focus in the movie, but the divorce and the absence of her father is like psychologically weighing on her, and I feel like that's what makes her an easy target for the demon to target her. And again, like it using her father's name as sort of like a pseudonym to get close to her and sort of be invited in to her is, I think, where a lot of that comes from. And again, just a great detail in the screenplay and in the book, because, and freakishly enough too, I don't know to what degree, but it is somewhat based on a true possession.
Sorry, right? I think it involved a boy, right? Instead of a girl.
Yeah,
they
a lot of details were changed. Yeah.
Of course, it's interesting too, because like we talked about that with like the horror genre in general, but not just like I think you could have made an equally compelling story where the possessed child is a boy, but there is something about seeing a possessed young girl that I think is probably more jarring to the senses as a viewer than it to a younger boy.
And there's some sequences in this movie that just work more effectively.
Wouldn't work
as
with a boy.
Girl. Yeah, exactly. The crucifix scene would probably the most. Yeah, and I think, I don't know if this is just my thoughts, but I do think that just naturally there is something that's more innocent about a young girl versus a young boy. Maybe it's just like the nuances of that.
No, I get that.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Yeah, and then
hard
also,
to articulate.
And also having to see this girl say the things that she says too, not even just the things that she does, but the things that have to come out of her mouth through this demon. Are
more effective by her being a woman.
Than the girl, than being a young girl, because like she says a lot of awful things in the movie. I also like the touch of having Chris McNeil being an actress, and like you know, I think having from this like kind of like lifestyle where like you're not even touched by things like that are this traumatic, you know. Right. I'm sure like the divorce and all that is in its own way, but like nothing like this
to this
right?
extent, yeah.
And I think I really see it in like in the scene where there's all those people at the house, and when Reagan comes downstairs and she's like, "You're gonna die up there," and she just pees on the floor.
Oh yeah.
Having that be in front of all of her like kind of like probably well-to-do like stuck-up friends. That this is not something that even like that first moment, it's like that's not something that she would be even used to dealing with. Like, like, and that I think that is a good added touch, having her be in that kind of profession where, of course, you would want to keep something like this a secret. Like, you wouldn't want it to be like put out there, really. Mm-hmm. And I think that made the story a lot more interesting. That if this wouldn't happen to like someone like her and her family, right? And now this really awful thing is happening to them.
She's even more of a fish out of water in that sense, because again, it's a great point. You don't really see this sort of demographic targeted for the sort of hardship. So it is kind of like a new perspective, and kind of adds in a thing that like this sort of problem being like possession, like can really happen to anybody.
Yeah. Okay. Completely.
Jam. Yeah.
And I also like to, even just in the lines of dialogue where they kind of talk about what the devil, I guess, can and can't do. When the devil, through her is saying like, where he asks like, "Who are you?" And basically he's like, "Oh, and I'm the devil, and I kindly undo these straps." Right. And then he's basically like, "Well, why can't you do that yourself?" Yeah. And she's like, "Oh, that'd be a vulgar display of power. I almost like that'd be too easy for me to do." Or then when she opens like the side table drawer and he's like, "Do it again," and she's like, "In time." Like, I'm not just gonna like. It's almost like this isn't like a pony show. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I've always really liked
that stuff. Was really cool.
That stuff as well. Yeah, and how one of my favorite aspects of this too is how the demon is like messing with Father Karras and like playing, like replicating his mother's voice and saying that she's in hell down there with
Yeah.
them. One of my favorite lines of dialogue is like, I think he's asking about I think they're talking about his mom, and he goes, "Where is she now?" And all she goes in the demon voice, she goes, "In here with us."
With us.
That's
Yeah.
my
Oh,
favorite
so,
line.
yeah.
It's so creepy. And like for Father Karras to like, even though like we know that the demon is like mischievous and lying, and that might not even be the case, just the thought of his mother like being in hell there, like with all these demons and the devil is like such a jarring thought.
Enduring even more torture. I mean,
Right.
like that kind of like that, and what that would do to him, because clearly he has guilt over like his mother's death, and that will definitely exploits
that. Yes.
fully. And even with Father Marin, before they even start the exorcism, when he's like, they're basically telling him not to respond, like don't like he's gonna try to trick you. There's all these things that he's gonna do. You can't respond, and like he's not strong enough not to. I mean, like when they're fully involved in that whole exorcism, and he's yelling at Father Karras like, "You allowed your mother to die," like making sure like that she like trying his best to get to him.
Yes,
and it ultimately really works when he's pretending to be her mother and is doing the whole like, why did you do this to me? Like going back and forth, and and then he like yells back at him. He's like, "You're not my mother." And then that's when Father Marin is like, "You need to get out." Like, like this isn't.
You're jeopardizing the exorcism here. Yeah. I've always really liked that, and in a sense, although we're following Regan and Chris throughout this movie, we do get enough of him where it honestly feels like his story just as much as it is theirs.
It like, well, it like really, it really shifts a bit once. She meets Father Karras, and it's like, wants to get him involved, and like it's not like her role, like Ellen Burstyn's role, gets diminished, but she definitely isn't in it as much once those interactions start. Once it becomes, how do we deal with this thing? And then of course they get Father Marin involved. Yeah, she has that scene towards the end where she's like, "Is it over yet?" And he says no, and we don't see her. Before that, she's absent from a lot of the stuff that goes on in the room and and everything. So it really becomes like his story a bit, and with not a ton of screen time to get all that across. I mean, it's not like he's not in the movie a lot compared to the rest of them. I mean, compared to like Ellen Burstyn and Linda Blair, but like you get a lot from him and enough about his character to know like it's kind of like crisis of faith that he's in. Why it'd be very easy for the demon to exploit the feelings he might have about his mom's death and all that. I guess the interesting thing is like Father Marin, I guess you don't really, there's not a lot there, but I mean, I don't know. I was struggling with that today about like how important. I mean, he's an important character in the movie, of course, but you don't really get a lot compared to like Father Karras and like the the rest of the people in the cast.
No, very much so. One thing that I think I would really like to see in this series would be like a prequel of his involvement, because I don't know if it's alluded in the movie. I think he's off screen, but the priests are talking about it. But he's done an exorcism before, and I don't know. I'm not clear on if it's this particular demon that he has faced off with before, or if it's just another one, and he has the experience in the exorcism, and that's why he's kind of called to help out. But yeah, I would love to have seen another iteration of that character, Father Marin, like doing battle with the devil or some other demon, because it's alluded to. We don't really see much, and like him facing off against the demon in Iraq in the opening sequence when like he's on that hill and like the statue of it is opposite him and the dogs are fighting and the music is rising. I think that is such an awesome sequence. I would love to see more of him in that earlier exorcism. It would be really, really cool to see. Yeah. Because he is a great character, but yeah, by no means is he a central figure.
Right, because even the attacks during the exorcism aren't really directed towards Father Marin. They're all really directed towards Father Karras.
Yeah.
I think he does have that. I think there's a couple where it's about to start, and I think he's like basically saying like, "Shove it up your ass, you motherfucking something cocksucker," and then he like pours the holy water and then like kind of shoots her down a bit. But most of the like, I would think if he had come to battle with that particular demon before, that there'd be more of like a personal
history or personal stakes.
But that'd be really interesting.
On that note, this is another thing that I only read today, but so Max von Sydow, who plays Father Marin, like fantastic Swedish actor. Did you know have you seen Seventh Seal? He's in that. He's great. He's in Shutter Island too. So
Minority Report. He's a really good actor.
Yeah, I'd read that today too. I'd never seen Minority Report, but I was surprised as he was in that. But he's always been one of those actors, and he only just died recently, like in the last couple of years. But he was always one of those actors that has been old forever, and I was always so surprised that he was still around as long as he was. But I didn't realize that like old age makeup and effects had been applied to him during this movie. I'm just curious if you knew how old he was during filming, because I was very shocked to realize he was much younger than I thought.
I didn't know exactly how old, and I've always been surprised because like he looked so old.
He looks like he's in his 60s. Yeah,
when he would pop up in movies like through the early 2000s and all that stuff, I was like, dude, this dude must be like 130. But how old was he when he made?
He was 44. I read that today. I was like,
they just old aged make him.
and like I think they probably touched up his hair too to make it grayer. But yeah, I think the idea was to make him seem like more of a matured priest, like that I guess had been around longer, just for the sake of his character. But I always found it like I just thought he genuinely was older at the time this movie was coming out. But yeah, no, he was only 44, which makes a lot more sense. Although he was quite old by the time that he had died. But I'm looking him up now. But yeah, he was fantastic. Yeah, he died in 2020. He was born in 1929. So yeah, depending on what his birthday was, he would have been right around 90.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. That's a good old. I mean, he looks legitimately old in that movie.
Of all the times I've seen it, I was under no impression that he was under any sort of makeup beyond your average stuff for movies. But yeah, no.
Well, for a movie called The Exorcist, I mean, there's a lot of really hard-hitting, groundbreaking scenes in the movie before you get to the exorcism. But I was kind of like wondering, like, what your thoughts. I mean, you've seen the movie a lot, like that. I mean, I feel like that sequence of stuff that happens is a lot of people associate the movie with everything that goes on in that room with the two priests and Reagan. I was kind of like wondering what you thought of those sequences as a whole, having seen it, as many times as you've seen it.
The sequences of the exorcism,
of the exorcism, or just of the exorcism itself, like toward that kind of results in the climax of the movie.
It's such a cherry on top to an already fantastically terrifying movie that it feels like you're working your way through this movie to the exorcism scene, which I think when it's all said and done it's like less than 10 minutes.
Yeah,
but it's very impactful. And again, like just a great, I guess it's technically, it's like the finale. But I feel like we're treated to so many fantastic sequences before we get there that like you're just completely satisfied throughout. Like we don't get too much time in between a very shocking, disturbing sequence that you feel like you're kind of on edge throughout the whole thing, not knowing when the next terrible thing is going to happen. But big fan of how that sequence is shot. I feel the dialogue is at the strongest when they're doing the exorcism. It's like the bread and butter to that movie, despite there being so many other fantastic sequences before then.
Yeah.
But I got to say, and I was going to ask you this too, of like the main scares, I would say, of this movie, I was curious what of the scenes, like which particular one affected you the most. And I was going to share mine too, because it's one that I know affected a lot of people, but it's not even really necessarily a scary aspect of the movie. But what scene gets you the most?
I think it's during the exorcism, right? Where like you get like quick shots of like the actual demon's like face.
Yeah, superimposed on
superimposed and like that stuff, because like at first you don't really like pay too much attention to it, and you're like, oh shit, what did I just see?
Right.
That was, I think that pretty stuck with me. There's stuff that's like not outwardly scary, but like gives me the chills. Like even watching today when they're performing the exorcism on her, and then the straps break, and then her eyes go like white, and you get the slow rise of her like floating up in the air, and like it's just so like, because it gets kind of quiet for like a little bit while that's happening, and then everything kind of goes chaotic again.
Yes.
And you're getting like the kind of cuts on her leg and like all this stuff that's kind of happening to her while this is happening. But that image is just that shot of her face, and when her eyes go white and you just see her just start to rise up. That is
definitely one of the images that sticks with the viewer more so than any others, for sure. That was a another shot that I'd like been familiar with before I'd seen it that like haunted me as a kid. I was like, I did not when I would see that, whether it be on the computer or something, like I would be like, oh, I don't want to look at the white-eyed. Like Regan's makeup when she's possessed is some of the scariest imagery in horror, even all these years later.
Yeah. What were yours? What was
for me?
Your...
And I know this is one of the scenes that prompted a lot of like the fainting at the theatrical viewing and stuff, and a lot of I think the vomit bags were required, but it's the arteriogram in the hospital where they put the catheter in her neck.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You get those 2 squirts of blood on. Oh my God. I cringe every time that scene. There was a few times in my early viewings of it when I was still like a teenager where I literally couldn't look. I saw it the first time not knowing what was going to come. And I was like, oh my God, that like I couldn't make a fist. You know, those scenes where you feel just weak. So the first viewing, I didn't know what was coming, but subsequent viewings until much later, when I was anticipating it, I couldn't look. It got me so bad. I didn't really understand the process or what they were doing and why that scene was in the movie. Like, what are they doing? Like, I get that they're, running medical tests, but I didn't
figure out what's on, right? Yeah.
That scene of the blood spurt coming out of her neck when she's in the hospital.
And what's funny is that has nothing to do with like the possession itself.
Exactly. But
the actual movie. Yeah.
But it is the scene that disturbs me the most in it. And I know I'm not alone in that, but beyond that, I think the spider crawl is one of the ones that I look forward to.
Comes out of nowhere. Dude,
oh my God. Yeah. And then you just cut, like, you see it and the blood's coming in her mouth and then you cut.
Cut. Yeah. It was like,
which is a funny editing choice.
When you think about, I mean, like, of course, everyone, like, signature, like the head turn and all that. But when you actually think about the actual hell that this girl's body goes through the entire movie, how damaged she would, I mean, once she comes out of it, how damaged she would be after that. Like that, when I think about, like, I know the movie doesn't explore that at all, but like, you see her go through such a physical ordeal that is not something you would quickly recover from, even though I know, and I'll talk about this a little bit when we mention the TV show. She says she doesn't remember what happened to her.
Okay.
Like in the movie, she just has no memory of it, I guess. And good, she probably shouldn't have it in the case of this movie. But yeah, like the stuff that you see, and like from start of this happening to her to the end, it's like, I mean, I
always look at it.
I mean, it's the devil. I mean, it's evil son of a bitch. Yeah. So I imagine that is what would happen. But
I always kind of just, to rationalize that, I always just kind of assumed like once the demon left her body just kind of reverted back to normal. Like all the pain and suffering was sort of like undone, sort of, and that's kind of why she's like not doesn't have any lingering effects from it. If that's the case, I have no idea. I don't know what the case is like in the real one, but I do I've read too that the original exorcism that this movie was adapted from, the boy involved supposedly didn't have any memory of it either, and it didn't really impact his life. I think he went to, from what I read anyway, said that he went on to have like a successful career. I think he worked for NASA in some capacity, like had no recollection of the exorcism, the possession, anything like that. So it's funny that they kind of kept that in vein of like canonically in the show. I mean, probably something that your brain, like trauma like that, your brain can actively make you forget, right? It's a cool little psychological tool that it has, but I can imagine that as an explanation for that, but who knows?
No. And I wanted to ask you, I mean, the assumption is that Father Marin, like, I'm guessing his heart gives out. Is that kind of what?
Right. Yeah. Heart attack.
Assume that had a heart attack. I've always thought, I can't tell. Of course, we know that the devil ends up snickering and laughing eventually, but there's like 2 other shots before, while Father Karras comes in and is like trying to revive him, where the devil is not really like laughing. He almost looks like the character Regan looks confused, almost like what happened kind of thing, where it doesn't look like it completely relishing in the fact that this guy's dead yet until he starts like snickering. And I can't tell if it's just like, if there's a little bit of kind of Regan's like, in her still, or in there still, where that is coming through or not. Of course, by the time he starts giggling and laughing about it, exactly. He's very happy with what transpired. But But I always thought those two shots were interesting. I mean, I know you've seen the movie a lot, and like if you just want to like take a crack at that scene again, like it just like that's like the two looks before then, or just it's just like it doesn't look like someone that's completely relishing in like what just happened.
Right. And
I guess
I can kind of imagine what you're getting at, but having not seen it like for this watch, I can't exactly, I guess I can't really weigh in. I don't have an opinion. Like I'd have to see it again to really like get in touch with that, because I'm like a year or two off my last watch of it, so I can't exactly think. But I kind of like the train of thought that you're on, that it might be Regan fighting through a little bit and not being aware of what's going on, or maybe the demon sort of like kind of toying with Father Karras, being like, oh, maybe you can revive him, maybe he's not actually dead yet. And then once he kind of realizes all hope is lost, that then he starts to kind of cackle out of torment towards him, kind of realizing, oh no, you can't actually save him, he is gone. But I'm not exactly sure. I hadn't thought about that detail, just having not seen it recently.
I want to ask you this too. How do you feel about the ending itself? I mean, the whole like, there's the beating and the whole like, come into me, and then of course it does, and then I'm guessing to kind of save himself from having to go through that, and like anyone else, he ends up sacrificing himself and killing himself.
Right.
I would just think, because the devil seems so smart throughout this, that it seems almost easy the way that it happens, and that he wouldn't be easily tricked into like, all right, to come into him and then like allow himself to be for it to end that way. I guess there's no other way for the movie to really end.
I've always admired the ending in Father Karras' sacrifice. I thought it was a great way to trick the demon into, I guess, getting out of Regan just to be put down instantly. But I've never really understood the implications of dying while in the process of being possessed, what that will mean for Karras' soul, if he's kind of entwined with the demon in the afterlife, or if that means that he's kind of condemned himself to hell because he was in the process of being possessed when he died. And suicide is like a very biblical sin. I don't really get I'm not particularly religious, so I didn't really understand like what that might mean. But it seems like we do get a little bit of Father Karras still being there in his like final moments, because he's like squeezing the hand of that other priest, right, that's there with him as he's dying. So it seems like he's still himself when he does go, and I don't know really what would happen to. I don't imagine that it's a be all end all destruction of that demon's like presence. Don't really know where it goes from there, but at least it's not in Regan anymore, and that battle is at least won. But I feel like the war, so to speak, is far from over as far as that demon is considered. But I always really liked the ending, but I think that it's ambiguous enough that it's still intriguing to think about what might be happening once the credits start rolling. But never felt, and I haven't seen any of the sequels, so I don't know if that's explored upon. I know some characters from the first Exorcist do appear in the sequels, but I really don't have any insight as if they're even fighting the same evil in the sequels, if it's different possessions. I really don't know anything. Have you seen any of the sequels?
I've seen Exorcist 2, The Heretic,
which is shit, apparently, right?
It's awful, and that one alludes to the fact that like Regan has like almost like psychic powers that allowed her to connect with the devil, and that's why the devil possessed her. It's a really like it's a shit show of a movie. I don't think anyone likes it. Linda Blair, it was like it was something. It's a sequel to a movie that made her successful. I think that's one of the reasons why she did it. I think everyone involved in that movie though doesn't have any nice things to say about it.
No,
Exorcist 3, I think, is the most I gotta watch that one again. I haven't seen it in a while. It is good. It's not as good as the first movie, but the third one is solid.
It's got that great jump scare too with the scissors, right? The shears. That's iconic as hell.
But yeah, I mean, I can see that having a little bit of ambiguity at the end. I guess I was just thinking of it too, like specific or very like on the nose, where it's like, oh, that seemed very easy to defeat the devil that way. But and then where did the devil go? Like he didn't die. I mean, I've assumed that where's it go from Father Karras? But maybe that act of sacrifice is something enough to defeat the devil in that moment. Like there was enough purity in him that was what could end that. Like he would sacrifice himself in order to maybe stop the potential spread of that evil.
Right. I gotta say, I do like that ending better than like sort of like the Conjuring-esque ending where they kind of just yell at it and throw holy water at it enough times and somehow banish it back to hell.
Yeah,
like,
you just scream at the devil enough, it just goes away.
Right. Or like I think they're borrowing this from like Christianity, but in the later Conjuring movies, they say like if you know the demon's true name, if you say it, that's enough to like kind of scare it away. I've never really understood how that is a defense mechanism, but I think the Exorcist ending, you know, as maybe imperfect as it is as a wholesale solution, has always really worked for me. I've always admired it. One thing that I'm just borrowing from earlier in the conversation when you said that you saw it in theaters for the re-release, did you know about? So there's obviously many edits. The director's cut. There's more scenes inserted into it. But did you realize that the theatrical, like the moviegoers in '73 when the movie comes out, did not get that spider walk down the stairs?
They did not. Yeah. So that was added. Yeah.
And so super awesome. You get to see that in theaters because that would have been you wouldn't have seen that in your earlier version.
No, not at all. So it's like
that would have been a terrifying little twist too to be treated to that. I'm so glad that it was added because I never have seen the movie without that scene because my DVD obviously must be post 2000. But I love that scene so much. I couldn't imagine not having seen that. And then for the audience goers that never got to see that version, like it's such a disservice. I feel like it. And I think the idea was like. So it had to be the actress was because again, it's not Linda Blair, it's that other double. But she's suspended on wires and like attached like a harness. And I don't think there was like a practical way for them to edit out the harness and the wires. So until technology kind of gave them that advantage later, but really effective scene. It's a shame that it wasn't there in the original version, but
cool that we got it.
Super cool tidbit. Yeah, I never would have noted that otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. I guess we can throw in some fun little facts about the movie, unless there's some other things that you wanted to mention.
No, there was. I kind of had.
Go ahead.
Trivia. Well, it's a mute now, but I did have some trivia questions I wanted to fire at you.
Oh yeah,
somewhere, but we've covered them all, so they've all been spoiled. But I had like a few, and I knew that they range. I just kind of cherry picked them from like IMDb's trivia. The only one I think that we didn't actually just talk about in the conversation was there was a household item in particular that this movie convinced lots of people to do away with, and I think it contributed to like the lack of like their presence in just like popular culture afterwards. Any idea what that might have been?
No, what was it?
It was Ouija boards. So apparently
Ouija boards?
people that had Ouija boards. Yeah. So I was surprised to find out they were like a staple in like American households until this movie, and a lot of people did away with them because of how terrified they were.
They probably burned them.
I would have not. I've never owned one. I've used them and they're fun and all, but
I've never owned one either.
I won't ever, even though I'm not that superstitious. I'm just not inviting that sort of bad mojo, but thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, some of the other questions I had were like how many Oscars did it win, whose film debut it was Jason Miller's, and the Spider Walk not being in the original cut. But I would love to hear some more fun facts about it because this IMDb page is full of
there's
fun facts.
A lot. Yeah, there's a lot. Mike Oldfield's Tubular Bells, which is like, it's a signature piece of music that is so associated with the movie, even though they said it features just in like not even like a lot of the movie. It's like two scenes where you hear it.
Is it like the main Exorcist theme, or is that called something else? Okay,
so it's called Tubular Bells, but and there was another score that I guess Friedkin rejected and got rid of, and then he heard Tubular Bells, which is it's a studio album by Mike Oldfield that was released in May of that year. The movie when it came out, Friedkin heard the piece of that music. And while he was in the offices waiting to do something else, and was like, I want that piece of music. Nice. And even though it doesn't dominate the film at all, it's not like it's like a main, like, it's not like the Halloween theme where it plays like multiple times.
Right.
But everything associated with the movie became so popular. They said that initially Tubular Bells sold slowly, but it gained worldwide attention in December 1973 when its opening theme was used for the soundtrack to the horror film The Exorcist. This led to a huge surge in sales, which increased Oldfield's profile and played an important part in the growth of the Virgin Music Group. It eventually ended up selling 2.7 million copies in the UK and an estimated 15 million copies worldwide following the release of The Exorcist. And it's so closely related to the movie that I guess Mike Oldfield has been too frightened to even see the film, I guess.
Wow.
But is, his music is, that piece of music is iconic, and he's aware of that. But yeah, he's been too afraid to even see the movie.
Hilarious side note about that track. I can't remember if I had mentioned this in an episode or to you off camera, or if I'd even mentioned it at all. But my first time seeing the Exorcist Believer trailer back in like August, it was premiering in front of this movie I was seeing. I can't remember what now. I did not realize what this trailer was. That I was watching, that it was the Exorcist prequel, and I had known that it was in production. I just wasn't expecting a trailer for it. And even I heard the Exorcist theme playing like halfway through the trailer when things started to pick up, and I was like, why is this so familiar?
Why do I recognize
I
this?
felt like such a schmuck because Cam was with me, and I was like, what is going on here? Because this is the Exorcist prequel, you idiot. Like, what do you mean? I was like, and then as soon as he said that, I was like, of course, that's where this music is from. But yeah, it really fooled me. Yeah,
it's iconic music too. Like it's really fitting creepy in its own right. Yeah. Also, The Exorcist was released initially in 24 theaters in the U.S. on December 26, 1973. Audiences waited in long lines during cold weather to sold out shows, which made the movie even more profitable for Warner Brothers. They also said that some viewers suffered adverse physical reactions, fainting or vomiting to shocking scenes, like you said. And that scene in particular was being the main one. The one that got you is the one that really jolted people the most.
Rightfully so. That scene fucking is crazy.
Many children were allowed to see it, leading to charges that the NBA ratings board had accommodated Warner by giving the film an R rating instead of an X rating to ensure the troubled production its commercial success. Several cities attempted to ban the movie outright or prevent children from attending the movie at all. And of course, this also had a very troubled production history. Well, I guess that's the right word for it. It took place in both hot deserts and on refrigerated sets. Many cast and crew were injured. Some died, like you said. An unusual accidents delayed shooting. Production took twice as long as scheduled and cost almost 3 times the initial budget because of the many mishaps. That's why everyone still believes that there is an Exorcist curse.
Mm-hmm.
But they said this is one of the few movies where the cultural conversation is what helped, they think, it lead to like so many that even getting acknowledgement from the Academy Awards, Best Picture nomination. It really kind of broke into the zeitgeist when it came out and was that kind of like this water cooler movie that everyone talked about. I think it's really cool that Blatty won Best Adapted Screenplay because the screenplay is really good.
Oh, it's phenomenal. It's bulletproof.
And Best Sound. Sounds great, of course. I again, if you get the 4K, actually, you know what? I haven't watched the DVD in a while because I've had it on Blu-ray for so long. I even think the DVD sounds great on surround sound too, though. Like the sound itself is just really good.
It is. I've always been a strong suit of that movie for sure. There's not really a facet of this movie that is lacking. It's just all, and that's what makes it such a great piece of filmmaking. Aside from just being a great horror movie, like it's just done and crafted so well. And I guess that's free. We owe that to Friedkin, who was a fantastic director. Even this movie aside, I mean, it was his next movie, I think, or did he do Sorcerer in 74, or was his next movie The French Connection? Because he won Best Director for French Connection.
I think Sorcerer comes after Exorcist, because I remember reading after he died that the reason that title, they really sold that title because they wanted it to sound like it was somehow
which is such a weird. You mentioned that, I remember that, which is such a weird thing. But no, definitely after The Exorcist. I just couldn't remember how far after, but. It's funny, like he won, and The French Connection is a fantastic movie of his as well, and he won director for. But I feel like this is his masterpiece.
Yeah, and rightfully so. The exorcism scenes were challenging to film. They said Friedkin wanted the bedroom set to be cold enough to see the actor's breath, as described in the novel. A $50,000 refrigeration system was installed to cool the set to negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's negative 29 degrees Celsius.
Oh my God.
You
do not need to be that cold to see breath at all.
Since the set lighting warmed the air, it remained cold enough to film for only 3 minutes at a time. Due to frequent breakdowns, only 5 shots can be finished each day. The complete scene, filmed in script order, took a month to complete.
Jesus. He's not doing himself any favors for that. No.
Apparently, the scene where Reagan levitates was the most challenging shot in the sequence. The 80-pound, I guess, like bodysuit that Blair wore under her nightgown was attached to hooks and monofilament wires so they could actually lift her up. But she was everyone, I guess, in that scene was very uncomfortable the entire time.
I can imagine. One of the more effective shots too.
And Friedkin didn't want any scenes in the movie to have any kind of spooky lights that you typically saw in horror films. So all the light in the bedroom comes from a visible source. The room's color scheme also suggested black and white film with gray taupe walls. Reagan's bedding is a neutral beige, and the priest in black. That's just what he wanted to kind of set that stuff apart. And then the Father Merrin's arrival scene, which is like you said, it's the key art. It's a lot of people. It's not just a iconic scene. Was filmed on Max von Sydow's first day on set, so that's very fitting.
Yeah, totally. Like his actual arrival.
Yeah. It's considered one of the most famous scenes in the movie, used for film posters and home media release covers. It was inspired by a 1954 painting called The Empire of Light. Friedkin wanted to evoke visually the language that he used in the novel for this scene, likening Merrin to a melancholy traveler frozen in time, standing next to a streetlight in the fog when he gets out of the cab.
And yeah, melancholy is a great word to describe that. It's funny, having read about the artwork that scene is derived from, it doesn't seem that similar to the picture that it comes from. I looked at it, and there's similarities there. There's a lamppost and whatnot, but it does feel very much like its own. But I guess that's the beauty of art, and being inspired by other things, you can play around with it a little bit. But yeah, I never would have looked at that artwork and then that shot from The Exorcist and thought, oh, that's derivative of that, or that was what the inspiration was from. But cool, regardless.
That's cool. The crucifix scene, this is just funny to have what the conversations were on set, but they said while filming the scene where the possessed Reagan masturbates with the crucifix, Dietz, who filled in for Blair during those scenes, and Friedkin had this long discussion about the right way to jerk off, and I showed him why a woman has to churn her wrists more than a man does. At the time, Friedkin said that the scene's power over audiences came from its unusual combination of sex and religion. To many viewers, it lasted much longer than its 50 seconds. It's not long at all, apparently. He had filmed much more of it, but ultimately decided that it was about how much could I take while watching it.
Okay.
And the scene's power, most people says that it's Friedkin's head-on approach to it, centering it on a brightly lit screen, punctuating the thrust with a stabbing sound, blatantly pleaded with Friedkin to stop destroying the film. Friedkin just responded that the scene would be one of the film's biggest draws. When it turned out that it was, the author found it terribly depressing.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's funny considering that he wrote the screenplay and the source novel. But
yeah, and then Ann Miles actually was the stunt woman that did the spider walk scene and was not credited for it, and because Friedkin cut it, but then it was included in the re-released director's cut. So then,
thank God,
they had to end up giving her credit for it. And there's so much more you can learn about the whole curse. That could be its own episode.
Oh my God, absolutely.
There's a show I think called Cursed on Shudder. It's a horror streaming service, and they covered the Exorcist curse. If you guys ever want to watch, because they did Poltergeist, The Crow, a few other movies that were perceived to be cursed productions, and yeah, there is a lot that happened during and after. And I think a lot of the reason that curse has such power is because you're dealing with a movie that deals with religion, that deals with this kind of power struggle between faith and the devil, and like the purest kind of form of evil. And I think that's why people think if you're making a movie like that, it kind of drudges up all this stuff, stuff you really shouldn't be fucking with. And that's probably why like people think it's cursed.
Right. Kind of makes you believe in that sort of thing a little bit. There's too many coincidences sort of to just brush off as happenstance.
But it is an interesting watch if you ever want to like look into that or even reading about it. I mean, there's a lot on the Exorcist curse in general. And then Warner scheduled the Exorcist for release the day after Christmas. They said this was not necessarily on purpose. It was scheduled for an earlier release, but that was postponed due to post-production delays. Friedkin was angry about this, believing that it hurt the film commercially if it was released the day before, the day after Christmas. He had wanted to release before or on the holiday. It had been speculated that Warner's wanted to avoid any controversies that might come from releasing a film about demonic possession before a major religious holiday. But other people conversely believe that the studio chose Christmas to stroke controversy on purpose.
That sounds more accurate, honestly.
Yeah. Friedkin supposedly had seen what Paramount had done to make The Godfather run a success after its own troubled production. He had wanted Warner to choose a more favorable release date, such as March, like The Godfather. But it ended up working in the film's favor because it ended up becoming the highest rated or highest grossing R-rated film until it. Through various re-releases and all that, the film has grossed $428.2 million worldwide on a $12 million budget.
Whew.
Which is a lot of money in 1973.
I don't. Okay, I was gonna say I don't imagine that's adjusted for inflation. That's $1973.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that is astronomical.
That's crazy.
When adjusted, that's crazy.
Interesting too. None of the theaters booked for the initial release were in black neighborhoods such as South Central Los Angeles, since the studio did not expect the audience to be interested in the film, which had no black characters. After the theater in a predominantly white West showing, the film was overwhelmed with moviegoers from South Central. It was booked. It was eventually booked in theaters there when they realized that people were coming from there to go see it in white neighborhoods. Black enthusiasm. Yeah, it's interesting. Black enthusiasm for The Exorcist has been credited with ending mainstream studio support for black exploitation movies since Hollywood realized that black audiences did not show any preference for them. The New York Times reported that the audience lined up to see the film was between 1/4 and 1/3 black at a theater on the mostly white Upper East Side of Manhattan showing the film. One black patron said when asked why they might be, why that might be, they said they relate to voodoo and witchcraft and that kind of devil stuff. Many still believe in black magic, especially those from Haiti and in the Deep South. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I never had considered about the racial implications to that, but I hadn't even really started to think that there are no black characters in the movie. But yeah, goes to show, like, of course, silly to think that they wouldn't be intrigued to go see that.
Yeah, and it also kind of got me like that is they've become. I mean, it's become now known that the African American audience, Hispanic audience is huge when it comes to horror films. Like, when you break it down like demographically and like when they break down box office, it tends to lean more towards that particular nationality. So I mean, I'm guessing they learned then with this.
I guess
this was like, this is what those that they want these kind of movies, and that's kind of interesting that they watch that kind of play out in real time. Like, we weren't going to even book it in a theater in that location until they realized that these people, they were coming from out over there. They're like, we want to go see it. Yeah.
Nice of them to adjust to and accommodate that interest by showing it in theaters, for that demographic.
Yeah.
And I guess that is
Yeah, for sure. We already talked about the box office records. It was the top grossing R-rated horror film for almost half a century. In 1999, The Sixth Sense beat the film as the highest grossing supernatural horror film until it took the honor in 2017. On both charts, The Exorcist, along with The Blair Witch Project, are the only 20th century releases in the top 10 as far as R-rated like successes in that regard. Always weird to think that Sixth Sense is R-rated because it doesn't. I feel like there's a lot that happens in that movie.
I'm surprised to hear that it is too.
I don't. This probably doesn't count. Well, I don't know. Rotten Tomatoes. It has a 78% on Rotten Tomatoes out of 172 reviews counted. I think this is hard to gauge though because this is like a combination of, I guess, older reviews and then newer ones, and then people reevaluating the movie later. I would expect it to be higher, but
yeah, me too. I mean, 172 reviews is a lot, and I'm sure the religious components, if there are any critics in there that are probably offended by what is shown in that movie, that can contribute to it. But it's definitely higher than a 72. That movie is, for me, it's a personal. I know we get to this at the end, but that's a 10 out of 10 movie for myself. But such is life.
Director Martin Scorsese put The Exorcist on his list of the 11 scariest horror films he's ever seen. Other filmmakers, including Stanley Kubrick and David Fincher, have called The Exorcist as a favorite. In 2008, it was named one of Empire's the 500 greatest movies ever made. The Times put it on a similar list of 1,000 films. John Carpenter listed The Exorcist as one of his top 8 scariest horror classics and said it influenced his 1980 supernatural horror film, The Fog.
Which I just watched. I'm trying to think.
She does what?
Huh.
I just watched it too. Oh.
I'm trying to think of like where I see that in that.
Where
movie.
I see that, yeah.
I wasn't thinking about.
I'm gonna watch it again.
Yeah. That's cool. Other than the atmosphere, I guess. Yeah, but
yeah. Some critics wondered in 2000 when it was re-released whether The Exorcist would affect contemporary audiences since it had been so widely imitated and emulated. Malcolm Johnson of the Hartford Courant said described it as a little old hat in 2000. But for the most part, they thought it had some of the same effect on modern day audiences, and that it also found it to be a much deeper movie now than even in 1973.
Okay.
That's a lot.
There's no shortage of fun facts about that movie. But yeah, no, I do find, even reading about it today, that there are so many details that you can not even consider until you see it again. Like there's so much more to be uncovered and discovered and touched upon with every rewatch of this movie. It's just one of those ones that is just a melting pot of different filming techniques and subliminal messaging and the objective stuff that you're seeing on the screen. There are just a lot of avenues in this movie that you can spend time on, and naturally you're not going to get to everything, but there's probably a whole other episode we could do with this movie and not even touch the same.
I know.
place.
I just saw. Yeah, exactly. I agree. That's an interesting thing too. The success of The Exorcist made the studio put more money into The Omen, which had similar themes dealing with religion, and that film became a huge hit as well. Have you seen The Omen?
I have seen The Omen once.
Actually,
wasn't that long ago, but it's one of those. I've only seen it one time. I don't remember a whole lot, but it was a very good movie.
I think it stands up. The remake is well, but the original is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we got sequels, and that could also be its own episode about why they didn't really
take off.
It's crazy. While it's a franchise that has like a few entries in it. I mean, but none of them particularly well regarded, except for the third one.
Well, yeah, I know it goes Exorcist 1, Exorcist 2, The Heretic, Exorcist 3, and then there's somewhere in there, there's Paul Schrader's one called Dominion.
And so that's when you get the two that are basically like they were
same thing.
But then kind of marketed differently, and then there were just different scenes, and one is a little bit more cerebral, and the other one is a bit more like what they would describe as a more visceral kind of horror movie.
Okay.
And that one did come out in theaters. I think it had an $18 million opening weekend. It did okay. But then I guess people that seen, I think I have seen Dominion. I just don't remember much from it. See, this is what these episodes do. I'm going to want to, not that I planned on watching any of the other Exorcist movies. I guess I could check it out just to kind of see.
The only other ones I have Exorcist 3 on DVD, and I have Dominion, and that's why I'll probably end up watching them. It's just a matter of when. I know my viewing schedule is pretty packed over the next little bit, but I would like to see the third at least because it's pretty well regarded as far as the Exorcist sequels are concerned. And it's got one of the, I think it's got a pretty iconic jump scare that I really want to see, but one of these days I'll get around to it.
And this is a little blurb about Exorcist 2: The Heretic. It was released on June 17, 1977 by Warner Brothers. It received generally negative reviews from critics and is often considered to be one of the worst films ever made. It was the last film to feature veteran actor Paul Heinrich, and despite earning over $30 million domestically, which is way less than the original, against a $14 million production budget, the negative reception meant that the next Exorcist film would not come until 1990 with Exorcist 3, which ignored the events of the second movie. Neither William Peter Blatty nor William Friedkin were involved and did not want to be involved. Linda Blair agreed to reprise her role of Reagan for Exorcist 2 but refused to wear demon makeup. A double was used for the brief flashback scenes depicting a demonic Reagan. So that was that. And she also regrets doing the sequel.
No kidding. Yeah, doesn't seem like anything. I'm not surprised that this movie didn't do well, but even with a movie like the first being so iconic and well regarded, I'm surprised it only made 30 million. I would have thought more people would go just to see it.
That's just saying, just the name, I guess, that maybe that gets a big opening weekend and then
completely
it falls apart.
Dies. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's surprising,
and this sounds like something William Friedkin would say about the sequel. He said it diminished the value of the original and called it the worst piece of crap he's ever seen and a freaking disgrace.
That does
and sound and he also said the film was made by a demented mind.
Okay. Yeah, he's a very outspoken guy.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back. But yeah, and also, like I said, I know people that the TV show is really good, particularly season 1. It is one of those Fox shows that aired on Friday nights, so that's like a death slot basically.
I see.
No,
yeah,
the target audience is not at home on Friday.
It was poor ratings that killed it, right? Only got 2 seasons, and then it was canceled.
Only got 2 seasons, but the first season's very good. And I won't reveal it here. If you know the show, you know what the connection is between the TV show and season 1 and the movie. It's very well placed into the episode count of season 1, and it gives the first season a lot more weight once you realize how it's connected to the movie. And honestly, people who did watch the show really enjoyed it, and it got really good reviews from critics as well. If you can come across it, I know you got a lot to watch, but like somewhere down the line, at least season 1, season 2 is good too, but season 1 is more directly intertwined with The Exorcist.
I remember the promo because I think it ran from 2016 to 2018. And I do remember seeing trailers and watching one of them, and I think some of it was set in like an asylum or something, right? Or there's sequences at like a hospital, and I remember thinking like I was very like what's the word I'm looking for here? Just I wasn't excited. I was kind of antagonistic, I guess, towards it. I was like, this isn't gonna. It was at that time where like this was sort of a common thing, and we were getting into these legacy sequels and reboots, and I just wasn't really on board with it. And I was such a fan of the original at that time that I kind of turned my nose up to it. But it'd been years since I'd even thought about this show, and I didn't really hear what ended up happening to it. But it's good to know that it was well received. I would at least check it out. Two seasons of TV isn't that much of a demand. So
no, not at all. And even if you don't know watch season 2, it's a different story. So
okay. Is it like really an anthology or?
Yeah, we're going to set it up that way. If it would have last longer. But season 1 is really fun, good watch, and like it does connect to the movie eventually. And it was really smart how they did it. And like I said, it was smart not to try to top the movie and just make a nice companion piece to the movie, which something that most of the theatrical sequels couldn't do. And this TV show did. So I think a lot of people, when you talk about like, the sequels didn't do all that great or they weren't that successful, people who have seen the show are like, if you want something that was well made from this stuff, then that first season of that show is something you should check out. But yeah, definitely
add it to the watch list.
Add to your very long watch list. Is this something that's hard to give a score to?
No, not at all. Like I said, 10 out of 10 as a movie and as a horror flick.
Yeah,
this movie does no wrong for me. I mean, it's in the same vein as Hereditary, where it's, to me, it takes its time to really get to the meat, but everything that we do see on screen before, I think, just complements the rest of the movie. It is like a family drama in the same sense as Hereditary. It's funny just to compare those movies. I see where Ari Aster's debut kind of borrows a lot from this, and there's a lot of similar themes, but all the better for it. It's just the pinnacle of horror cinema, what thousands of movies have tried to replicate since, and very few have even come close to. And for that reason, I really have never found anything to take away a point from this movie. It's one of my favorites, and I'm sure will remain that way for a long time. But what about you? Is it difficult to give a score?
No, it's 10 out of 10. It's perfect. It's a perfect movie. I can't. I don't have any. And I know when I mentioned this stuff about the ending and like all that stuff, like it wasn't too easy to do that. That wasn't a detriment. That was just more me
nitpicking.
Nitpicking. Yeah. And no, it's a perfect movie. It's really well made. It's still a beautiful piece of cinema to look at. The acting is very good. The screenplay is amazing.
I always enjoy just as much, if not more, when I watch it.
Also, not just shock value for the sake of shock value. I think you earn every disturbing moment in the movie. It's not just trying to just throw stuff at you to just like freak you out. It's just like, every disturbing moment's necessary, I think.
And
in it.
Oddly enough, sorry, I interrupted you there.
Oh, no, go. You're good.
I was gonna say, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that there's any none that I can think of, any traditional just jump scare in this movie. Like all the horror is you are just seeing it. It doesn't just kind of come from out of nowhere. I can't think of anything that just pops on screen.
It's not a movie with like the orchestra score like Stinger. There's not like that kind of that doesn't really happen.
Yeah, which is just all the more impressive.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, God, this is our first 10 out of 10 that we've talked about.
I think so. Yeah.
So yeah,
I'm
perfect
sure it
movie.
comes as no shock to
I know.
people that have seen it. It's phenomenal.
It's a great movie, and I'm happy that we're covering it ahead of The Exorcist Believer, which we have to predict box office wise.
Yes.
I was wrong about Sultan, even though it's a respectable $18 million opening. It only has a $13 million budget. I guess worldwide it opened to $29.4 million, so not a bad opening at all. I said 30. I was really bullish in my prediction for it, but I thought like the marketing was there, and it felt like there was a lot of like big interest. But I think it did what it needed to do, which was to get those fans back that maybe fell off on Spiral and then Jigsaw. The last two. You said 23, right? So you're closer.
That's right, and even still a little bit higher for what it earned. But I think that opening for it is fantastic. Nice to see it making some money, and I'm sure the strong reviews and not too much competition for its second week will.
And I think spooky season will help.
Yeah.
Too. Spooky season. People will have 3 offerings. They have Saw. They have The Exorcist opening this weekend, and at the very end of October, they have Five Nights at Freddy's, which is opening on October 27th. Another horror movie. So I mean, there'll be 3 different ones to choose from, and all these movies get like a little uptick as Halloween gets closer.
Right.
So I think it'll even be fine, even with competition from The Exorcist. I think like.
People will be going out to see scary stuff, I'm sure, especially this month.
Yeah.
It's weird to think about, though. It doesn't seem like 2 of those 3 options that you mentioned are like legacy, long-time IPs. It's funny that there's not more original horror options this month to choose from. And even Five Nights at Freddy's is an adaptation from a video game, I believe. I don't know if it's from any other source material, but. It's interesting to chew on there. I mean, I feel like other previous Halloweens have more to offer, but interesting. It'd be cool to see how they all stack up once they're out of theaters.
Yeah. So what do we deadline saying 30 billion plus opening weekend.
Okay.
Lone Rage box office tracking saying 41. God, this is all going to come down to like reviews too. I think like a lot can change. I think a lot can change between like Thursday and Friday, where like that review embargo gets lifted like the day before the movie officially opens, and
which you said is traditionally not a great sign.
Not a good idea.
For quality.
And if reviews are trash, I don't know.
See, I don't know what sort of audience is left that's like really hankering for an Exorcist movie these days. We did just get earlier this year, we got the Pope's Exorcist, so it's not like, and there's been, Exorcist movies these days are a dime a dozen. There's been plenty out there, all of middling quality. The original now, which is one of the best horror movies of all time, undoubtedly is 50 years old. I feel like the younger audience probably hasn't seen it or hasn't seen any sequels. The older audience, I don't know how convinced they are to go see it. I'm sure horror fans in general will probably come out, but I'm with you. Like, I'm a little bit stuck on where to go for this one. I think 41 is on the generous side.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. And yeah, it's interesting because Blumhouse had Halloween, and now they're trying to do this again with The Exorcist.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, that Halloween 2018 opened to $72 million. I don't think that's happening with this.
I don't think that's happening here.
And I'm also wondering which one has bigger name or recognition. Is if it's the Halloween franchise or the Exorcist franchise that can pull in an audience that big, and maybe Halloween is something that's bigger than the Exorcist in that regard, because it has a lot of sequels that were successful in their own right, more so than the Exorcist did. I just don't know. I kind of agree with you, where I don't know the audience for it.
Yeah.
It's like who it is for. I mean, I guess it's us, and
exactly.
But beyond that,
it's so I'm at a number. I think it's a little bit underneath tracking, but I'm gonna go with 28 million.
Okay.
And even then, I don't feel like that enthusiastic for what I think this movie is going to do at the box office. And I'll be happy to be wrong. I want it to be good. I'm just a little bit negatively biased just because of what I know from this director and this isn't something I think people were clamoring for, but time will tell. I do expect that I'll go see it when I have the chance. Maybe Thursday. If not, I'm away the weekend, but I'd like to see it, and I'll be anticipating your review. So that'll be a factor. But yeah, 28 locked and loaded. What do you think?
All right, I'm gonna be bullish again, and I'm not going too high. I'm not going for the 41. I'm gonna say 35.
Okay.
A little above what the deadline's doing, but slightly below what Lone Range box office tracking is.
It's another $7 million gap between.
We got that going on.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay.
But yeah, 35, U28. We'll see how this all. I'd be very interested to watch its box office this weekend.
Yeah, I want it to be successful, but I don't want it to necessarily line up 3 or 4 Exorcist sequels after it.
Yeah, yeah, there's that too.
I don't want it to be that successful, so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see this weekend.
All right.
Yeah, it was a really fun discussion about the movie and other little horror movie news things that we had at the beginning. Look forward to we have an episode on Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the remake coming up, I believe next. Forgive us for not knowing for sure because we have other episodes that we're doing as well that we're trying to throw in.
It's a busy time here.
We still want to cover Hellraiser. We still want to have that James Wan discussion. We got Halloween 4 in the mix because that actually has an anniversary soon. Mm-hmm. And of course, the original Halloween will also be part. Surprisingly, a lot of people want to join us for Halloween 4. So
okay,
gotta narrow that down.
Yeah.
I think that Texas Chainsaw is what's next. And if that changes, we'll have it there at some point.
We'll let you know.
But it's all very fluid.
Exactly. And I'm happy that it is like this. I couldn't be more pumped just to be watching this sort of content during this month. Spooky season's awesome, and we'll roll with the punches. But it was great talking about The Exorcist today. One of our favorites, safe to say, I think. 10 out of 10 horror. It's great to have a conversation about something so iconic, and I'm sure many people are covering it. But if you have not seen The Exorcist, by all means, do yourself the favor. I'm sure it comes with both of our seals of approval.
Yep. Yeah. And also, pick up the 4K. It's pretty good. I'm holding it up right now. I don't love the new cover art.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I believe the image that's iconic should just remain the cover art. I get why. You want to maybe change it for something new. Mm-hmm. But
I think it'd be cool. Yeah. If it's going to be an alternate cover for that movie, I'd like it to be like the two priests at the bed as she's levitating. I think that would be an awesome shot to have on it. But that shot of Father Marin outside the house, like, you do not need to mess with perfection. No, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, sign us on off, buddy.
All righty. Well, guys, thanks a lot for listening to us chat about The Exorcist today. This has been episode 125 of Back to the Blockbuster. So we are now a quarter of the way through to our next 100th episode, if you can believe that. Seems like that time has flown. But yeah, been a fantastic chat. Love this movie to death. Thanks for joining us on it. If you guys haven't seen it, by all means, go watch William Friedkin's The Exorcist. It's a fantastic movie and one that has stood the test of time of horror cinema for a good reason. It's been a blast having you guys on with us. Thanks for listening. For those of you that maybe are new to the podcast, you guys can find us anywhere where you guys get your podcasts and anywhere on social media at Back to the Blockbuster. I've been Jackson. This has been Gaius. Thanks a lot for joining us, guys. And you guys enjoy what's left of spooky season, and we'll catch you later. Peace and take care.